so much for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
It's great to have you back. I'm really excited to be chatting because you're experimenting with a very different way of building product at LinkedIn that fully embraces what AI unlocks, kind of leans into what is now possible. And to me, this feels like this could be a model for how a lot of companies operate and how product ends up being built in the future. There's a lot of product leaders that are talking about AI, what they can do. It feels like you're actually doing this in a really, really radical way. And so I'm excited to learn from you, to hear about this, for listeners to understand what you're seeing, what you've learned. Let me start with just, why did you decide this was necessary? Why are you rethinking all of these things about how product has been built for a long time? AKA, why do people need to pay attention to what we're about to be talking about?
It really starts with kind of the basics. For me, technology has always been about empowerment. It's not about what it does for us, it's about what it enables us to do. And now we have this amazing opportunity in my mind to make it about meritocracy. And I think it's an opportunity, but it's also a necessity right now. And I want to put this in context where we're entering this phase where the time constant of change is far greater than the time constant of response. Basically means that change is happening faster than we're able to respond to it. Now, LinkedIn has this unique view of the world of work. So we actually have some pretty, in my mind, mind-blowing stats to kind of put this in perspective. When we look at like the skills required to do your job, by 2030, which is literally 4 years from now, sounds a long time, but 4 years from now, it will change by 70%. So whether or not you're looking to change your job is changing. The only question is, do you keep it? And then we look at organizationally, the fastest growing jobs right now, the most in-demand jobs in the market, are growing by north of 70% from last year's fastest growing job. So there's a new kind of iteration of what you need as an organization to thrive. And then you apply that to building products, and you realize that in order to stay competitive, you actually have to go back to some first principles, go back to the drawing board and reimagine what it means to be building. And what I love about this is, when you think about the role of a builder, which the builder is at the heart of the company, the goal is actually quite simple. The builder takes an idea and she brings it to life. That's really the process, right? And we all build those, let's call them like best practices. You research the problem really well, you spec it out, you design it, you code it, you launch it, and you iterate. That's basically it. But what happens at many at-scale companies, LinkedIn included and many other companies, over time, that process became very complex very quickly. So what happened? We took every step and we expanded it to a lot of sub-steps. Researching the problem became looking at, for us, 10 to 15 sources of information. Obviously talking to customers, but doing data pools, looking at feedback tickets in multiple sources, social media, interactions with customers. We probably have 10 to 15 sources of information we go through before we kind of feel like we have researched the problem really, really well. Think about reviews for product. There is design reviews, privacy reviews, security reviews. I can go on and on and on. And each one of those sub-steps actually has a valid reason to exist. But when you add the whole thing together, you're like, oh my God, this is why it takes to build a small feature, multiple teams, multiple code bases, multiple sprints, just to get it out to launch, and not talk about iterating, which is actually where you seek success. You never see success in the launch itself. So really the work itself is not complex, but the process we made very complex. And when I was digging in, I found it doesn't end there, because somebody has to do all those sub-steps. So what happened is you actually move from process complexity to organizational complexity as well. And then you actually led to micro-specialization. All those sub-steps are doing by somebody specific. So from one builder, we have multiple functions. Obviously, we have engineering, product, and design. And you can start questioning those lines. At least I am internally. And from there, we have a lot of subspecialties. It happens in every one of those functions. But imagine design. We have interaction design, animation design, content design, research. There's so many aspects to that. So they're all valid, but they all have people. And that entire process basically means a lot of, it's basically bloating, it's complexity. And then without noticing, you end up with this massively complex. We actually have this diagram that basically shows the process complexity, organizational complexity together. And usually people are like mind blown because they're working on one thing very specific. But when you zoom out, you have this, overwhelming experience you're kind of thinking about. And now we have this real opportunity to collapse the stack back up, go back to craftsmanship, rethink the product development lifecycle, which is where the full stack builder model comes to life.
Wow. Okay. There's so much here. We're going to be showing the visuals as you talk to help people see what you're explaining here. And all of this is very rational. Like if you have 15 sources of information, you like, why not pull from it? Like why miss out on that stuff? And what you're describing here is as you get more power and more specialized, like it all makes sense rationally. But when you start to step back and look at this, like, holy shit, it takes 6 months to launch one feature. I want to ask about the stat you shared. I think this is an incredibly powerful stat, and you have very unique data here to tell you this sort of stuff. So you said that something like 70% of the skills that people will need in the future are going to change
To do their current job.
to do their current job. And what is this looking at? Is this just like based on historical data, or how do you find that?
Yeah, to be fair, there was always a change, right? So it was never about just keep the skills you have today. But we've never seen such a dramatic part of your world today. So whether you are a marketer right now or a seller, or a recruiter, an engineer, engineering is where a lot of the investment is going in right now. In terms of agents, those jobs will change dramatically. I remember I started my role, my life as an engineer, and even then it's changed materially after 10 years. And then the change we're seeing right now, just thinking about in 4 years, what did it take to actually engineer really, really well, would be dramatically different, or to build software, to build an artifact of some sort. But it's true for almost every function. It's not equal. Some job like nurses will see less impact, but some jobs will see 95% impact.
There's also a stat that I don't think you mentioned here that I saw in the post when you first talked about this program, is that 70% of today's fastest growing jobs were not even on the list of jobs a year ago.
Yeah, so this is the fastest growing job on the list. Were not there a year ago, and then many of them don't even exist, a decade or two ago. There's actually some pretty amazing stats across the board.
Okay, so let's talk about this program that you built. Tell us the name, and then tell us the kind of the gist of what it is today and the vision of where you want it to be.
Yeah, so we call it the full stack builder model, and the goal. Always start with the goal. The goal itself is to empower great builders to take their idea and to take it to market, regardless of their role in the stack and specifically which team they're on. And the idea ultimately is to be able for that builder is to develop experiences end to end, to combine skills and expertise across what was traditionally distinct domains, to bring it all together. And it's not a sequence of steps. It's really a fluid interaction between human and machine. That's how the way I see it. And then when you look back at that product development lifecycle from the idea, the insight, all the way to launch, the key trait that I'm emphasizing for builders is where I want them to spend their time, is where I think great builders should shine in. So the idea of vision, coming up with a compelling stance about the future, empathy, super critical, right? Having a profound understanding of an unmet need. Communication is critical. And we see this a lot in job descriptions right now for almost every role, but the ability for you to align and rally others around an idea. Creativity, which for me is about coming up with possibilities beyond the obvious. For example, I don't think AI yet is great at creativity. I think it's kind of, in many ways, brings back the things you might not know about, but it's not the kind of next level creativity, which I think still humans are much better at. And then ultimately, what I think is the most important trait for a builder is judgment. That's, some people call it test making, but it's making high quality decisions in what is complex, ambiguous situations. Everything else, I'm working really hard to automate, really, really hard. And then when you think about the outcome, it's not just about having more shots at the goal, which I think people go like, oh, the iteration speed is going to be very high. Yes, but what you're really doing to an organization, the scale of at-scale organizations is they're a lot more nimble, a lot more adaptive, a lot more resilient. They can navigate the future. They can actually match the pace of change to the pace of response. And an analogy I have in mind is kind of Navy SEALs. You come to training, they're all kind of learning, they're cross-trained across multiple areas. What they specialize in is the mission. And they operate in small pods, and they're very nimble, and you can assemble them very quickly. And I think that's going to be the organization that will win in the future.
Okay. So the simple idea, if you just boil it down to a sentence, the idea here is there's a builder who goes through the entire product development process essentially on their own. They have an idea, they research, they do data, they prototype, design, ship. That's kind of like the vision of where this goes.
Yes, but it doesn't have to be on their own. It's not like, it's not, I still believe in teams.
Got
It's
it.
just
So smaller
smaller teams, and much more focused on the problem, the mission per se, versus, actually, one of the things we've done, as an example, we kind of started to do the idea of pods. We're no longer large teams. We assemble a team, ideally of full stack builders coming together. And, it's less about, can I have an engineer, design, PM working together and trying to combine this trio, looking at folks who can flex across. And then they tackle something for a quarter or so. And then we kind of reassemble those to different pods. That's like one example of a manifestation we're doing right now, and seeing actually some great success in both in terms of velocity, but also in terms of that focus and nimbleness of that team.
And it feels like the goal here, what you're trying to adjust and that broke as teams bloated, is speed and adaptability and flexibility, because going back to your original point that change is happening so much more quickly now that companies that have been building in this traditional way just can't compete.
Yeah, it's not that you have to break the model. I think the model is broken. It's just this pace of change is helping us realize it.
Okay, so then going back to the things that these builders still do versus what you want to automate. So the list you shared is they're responsible for the vision, empathy, communication, creativity, and judgment.
Yes. Yeah, and I would put a lot of the focus on the latter. I think if you ask me at the end of the day, what's the kind of most important trait, I would say it's that judgment, test-making ability.
And then in terms of what you're automating, what are some of the areas you've seen a lot of success in actually automating, and where do you think this goes?
Yeah. So I think just to kind of break it to pieces, and I think this is, if you were a startup right now, in many ways you can start this way, right? You can, there's no legacy code, there's no legacy structure. You run, and in fact, a lot of the startups I talk to that are build AI natively, they are just working at full stack builders. That's the way they start. If you're at a company at a scale of ours and many others in the market, in the market, you're like, this is almost like a new production function and mindset that you have to do. And there's really three components that we're working on. One is platform. The second one is the tools and the agents. And lastly is the culture. The platform one, this is the kind of level of investment you have to do before this actually starts. You start to see all the benefits accrue. But the platform for us, as an example, is re-architecting all of our core platforms so AI can reason over it. So we're building kind of this composable UI components with server side that we actually build. We're basically building for AI to be ready to bring it in. So you can't just go and bring a third-party tool and have it work on the LinkedIn stack. In fact, that's one of our biggest learnings. It never works. Never works. You have to bring it in and customize a lot of it, working almost in alpha mode with those companies to make it work internally.
So this is essentially re-architecting your code base to work more efficiently with AI. Is that one way to think about it?
Yes. And in many ways, working with those companies to adjust something in their stack to work with our stack as well. So
when you say those companies, meaning like the development agents like Cursors and Devons and such?
Yes, and or Figma on design. Or you can think about the design systems is another example of that. But you have to have that back and forth, because they're not, in many ways, we haven't seen anybody be able to work off the shelf immediately on our code-based design systems and unique context we have.
Just to follow that thread briefly, so there's Figma, that's interesting. So basically the way Figma exports and keeps your design system, that has to change to work better with AI is what I'm hearing.
They first need to know how to work with our design systems, which is something in many ways a lot of those companies are working on. Same with coding. It doesn't work that you just bring it in and it just reasons over your code base really well. We tried. We are building that layer that basically allows it to do so, whether it's Copilot or Cursor or Windsurf and so on.
Got it. Okay. Oh yeah, Copilot, Microsoft. I get it. Okay. Okay. So that's the platform. So that's an investment that you guys have to make AI effective at building and doing all these things.
And then you have tools. So tools is where you really build the agents. I mentioned I want to automate everything outside of those 5 traits that we talked about, and then we're building the tools for that. And then for that, actually very similarly, I can't just bring a tool from the outside and work. So I'll give you an example. We're building, one of our biggest things is building a trust agent. Trust is really important for us at LinkedIn. There's a lot of unique vectors which trust plays that LinkedIn doesn't place anywhere else. So we need to bring all of that know-how and context and information base into that agent. So we ended up building our own trust agent at LinkedIn.
And so what is this trust agent doing? Telling you when you're maybe exposing information they
So
shouldn't
when
be?
you build a spec, you build an idea, you walk through the trust agent, and it'll basically tell you how, what are your vulnerabilities, what, harm vectors potentially you're introducing or will be introduced as a result of that. And I had our head of trust build it. So the head of craft for every area is building their own agent. As an example, we took, we have one of our features for job seekers is called open to work. If you're looking for a job, you can put an open to work.
Yeah, little green thing on the circle.
And actually, it's a great signal. I'm seeing some great success from it. People are helping each other. The community really thrives around helping each other. But at the same time, it introduces a trust vector for bad actors because they're, open to work. People who are looking for a job are potentially more vulnerable to scams than other folks. So being able to think about how do we prevent all of those ahead of time. So we walked that spec from a couple of years ago through the trust agent. Not only was it able to find all the stuff we initiated at the beginning, but all the holes that we did not catch until later. So that's like a great example of something that actually worked really well. That's one. The other one is a growth agent, as an example. Again, LinkedIn has a very unique, actually we have an incredible growth team, growth process. We've kind of funneled all of our unique loops, our funnels, our tests of the past, everything into this growth agent. And now you can basically rock your spec through it, your idea for it, and it will not just allow you to do it better, it will actually critique how good is your idea. This is something we cannot bring off the shelf. It's very unique to LinkedIn. So we had to invest dramatically in it. And, one team which is using it right now, which is almost, I wasn't thinking about it at the beginning, but our UXR team, our UER team, like the user research team, is usually using that growth agent to understand out of all the things that are basically surfacing for members, which one has the biggest growth opportunity to have the biggest impact. That was not in the cards when we thought about that idea, but teams are basically funneling those ideas into this one. An example is our research agent. So research agent basically is trained on the personas of our members. You can think about like a small business owner, a job seeker, and so on. And it's using not just world knowledge, it's using all the research we've done in the past, all the support tickets coming in. Wow. So it's pretty good at understanding that persona at LinkedIn. So one example we had is a team came back with a spec. They weren't aware we had the research agent yet. I asked the research agent, for a small business owner, what did you think about the marketing spec we had? And it critiqued it extremely well. Actually, in many ways, shifted the direction of the team to focus on other integrations tools we can focus on. But it's very hard to have that visibility to all that corpus of knowledge inside of the company. That's another example. We have an analyst agent trained on all how you basically can query the entire LinkedIn graph, which is enormous. Instead of relying on your SQL queries or data science teams, you can use the analyst agent. All of those I would say I would call them still MVP++. The goal for us in the next couple of months to basically roll them out externally.
So
externally, I mean internally at LinkedIn.
Okay, not as new product lines.
Exactly.
Okay, so many questions. One is just how are you building this? Is there a platform you're using? What does it take to build an agent at LinkedIn? Is it all internal tools or is there a third party you use?
It's a great call. So I think we've been experimenting with a lot of tools. And I would say for a lot of those kind of knowledge corpus agents, we're using everything from Copilot Enterprise to ChatGPT Enterprise. By far, though, the most important part was basically our own customization of it. That's been where we saw the biggest gains. Even building the orchestrator across those, because you want the agents to start falling to each other. The trust agent should kind of work with the growth agent and do a back and forth versus doing it more sequentially. So we've done a lot of work internally to make it happen. This is why I think it does require that level of investment. And then in some cases, let's talk about, the design agent that we're working with. We're working with multiple companies to try and understand which product works best for us. And interestingly enough, and this is another learning, different teams gravitate to different products. So that's something we'll have to resolve and think about how we do this really well, because ultimately we were trying to kind of simplify the process as much as possible. But that was a big learning for us and which tools we use and how we basically integrate them in.
Got it. So like you might have an amazing Figma agent, but some teams want to use a different design tool.
Yeah, so like, we've kind of experimented with Figma and Subframe and magic patterns and so on, and we saw people gravitating, depending on the function, their level of visibility, their know-how of the tool before, they're gravitating to different tools. And ultimately, I don't want to have 8 design agents in the company, so we have to converge into at least a few. And I think it's similar across many areas, because the appeal of a lot of those agents are trying to solve similar end goal, but they're doing it very differently. And what you'll see that ultimately, I don't think there's going to be a winner takes all, because the starting point of the customer or the user will dictate a lot how simple they are for that use case.
Super interesting. The other interesting takeaway here is you're designing very specific agents that are one job to be done. Is that a very intentional decision? Did you try an agent that just is super intelligent on all these things?
We're ultimately we'll do an orchestrator. We're going to link the orchestrator across, but we did want to be able to rate and grade those agents really well on how they're doing. And I think there is a level of expertise. Now, we're kind of building this as in a way where we'll be able to mask a lot of those. So you might not know that there's a trust agent. You might have, we call this internally the product jammer agent that basically does your product jam, which is a process we do internally. You might just use the product jam engine, and that product jam engine will work with all the other agents. But now we're starting with that building blocks until we build the orchestrating layer across.
Another interesting takeaway from what you've been sharing is that so much of the work has gone into the beginning of the product development process, just like helping you craft the right requirements, clarify trust, and then here's product jam, and here's the research we've done. And I imagine it's because coding has already been accelerated with all these IDE tools. Talk about just like why that's maybe where most of the investment's gone and where you've seen the most impact so far.
No, 100%. Our coding investment started a while back, and those are full into place. We have our coding agent. In fact, I would kind of stage it into 2 parts of it. There is the idea to design part, and then there's the, let's call it the code to launch part. The code to launch part has gotten a lot of attention, and we're making some big inroads there. Everything from the coding agent to what we call the maintenance agent. When you have a failed build, it will do it for you. In fact, I think we're close to 50% of all those builds being done by the maintenance agent and a QA agent.
Wow. So this is when a break builds instead of engineers hopping on the issues.
You can still go and finish your coffee before you have to go and redo the build again.
Extremely cool.
But we haven't had much investment until we kind of launched this program in the idea to design area. And that's a material part of work. It's also where the quality, a lot of the work comes from, at least before you start to go into the coding phase. The idea is to empower everybody. So if you're an engineer, you can basically use all those tools at the front of the process and be able to be a full stack builder.
How long did it take to get this kind of in place for you to actually form your first team to build the initial agents and some of this backend, redo the code base sort of thing?
I announced this internally, end of last year. We really kind of started working, but it was more setting up the teams and the processes internally. We had our first MVPs of those agents, I think like 4 to 5 months after it was like really trained, I would say. But really the work itself has been kind of a couple of months of dedicated work. A lot of it has been getting all the corpus of data together, cleaning it up. That's actually a good learning as well. Like, it's not great to just give it access to your drive and say, reason all over this knowledge base. It actually does a very poor job understanding importance of the past and putting weights on stuff. You actually want to think about specifically what the context window you want to give it to and what's the knowledge base that you want to have it focus on. So even cleaning up, let's call them gold examples or golden examples to learn from, has been one of the biggest learnings. Just reasoning over your entire knowledge base did not work.
Yeah, that makes sense. There may be just like a researcher with a strong opinion about something that you disagree with, and it would know. It's like, oh, of course, this is data, this is fact.
Exactly. And then it doesn't always understand ties to original specs to success, right? You have to actually build. This is a really interesting way. When you think about how you bring those tools in, you can't just bring them in. You have to know what you feed them with. And what you feed them with is not just access. I see a lot of people just focus on the connectivity and integration. And it reminds me of this is almost like, this is actually more than 10 years ago when I was, co-rebuilding the team, co-rebuilding the feed at LinkedIn. And we started from scratch, and I had to like literally sit down and filter through examples of what is a good professional post on LinkedIn and what is not. And this was like weeks of work getting up with that golden sample of examples, but it wasn't the most important part was fitting at the right data, not all the data. So it requires work. This is where I would say, like, for many companies who are thinking about this phase, and I do a lot of sessions today with CPOs and CEOs on this process, you have to put this initial work to get the gains after. And when I think about it, I think there's a takeaway there, and generally with AI, even if you're learning it for the first time and so on, whether it's Cursor or whether it's design and with Figma or other tools or Lovable, you should be ready to invest those hours before you start seeing yourself pick up in velocity and quality, which will come up, but you have to invest that time.
This episode is brought to you by Miro. Every day, new headlines are scaring us about all the ways that AI is coming for our jobs, creating a lot of anxiety and fear. But a recent survey from Miro tells a different story. 76% of people believe that AI can benefit their role, but over 50% of people struggle to know when to use it. Enter Miro's Innovation Workspace, an intelligent platform that brings people and AI together in a shared space to get great work done. Miro has been empowering teams to transform bold ideas into the next big thing for over a decade. Today, they're at the forefront of bringing products to market even faster by unleashing the combined power of AI and human potential. Guests of this podcast often share Miro templates. I use it all the time to brainstorm ideas with my team. Teams especially can work with Miro AI to turn unstructured data like sticky notes or screenshots into usable diagrams, product briefs, data tables, and prototypes in minutes. You don't have to be an AI master or to toggle yet another tool. The work you're already doing in Miro's canvas is the prompt. Help your teams get great work done with Miro. Check it out at miro.com/Lenny. That's miro.com/Lenny. What's the current state of the pilot? How large is it? How many teams are doing it? What kind of stuff have you shipped? Just give us a sense of today's world.
Yeah, so we are, I wouldn't say we are yet at a very high sample rate where it's kind of a high percentage of the organization, but we have a substantial part of the organization already using it to provide a lot of the feedback. We're seeing a lot of great examples. So the way I think about the benefits is a function of experimentation volume multiplied by quality, how good are those experiments, divided by the time it takes to actually pull them out, like idea to launch. So on saving times, we're seeing whether it's PMs, designers, engineers, saving hours of work a week right now, whether it's the analyst agent we talked about, or the prototyping really quickly, or the product jamming experience has been a big part of that. On the quality side, we're seeing insights, discussions just be much, much better. And by the way, quality and time, sometimes they help each other because it's high quality, you don't have to spend as much time on something. So we were seeing that applied in, and the volume, I wouldn't say we had a rate where I'm seeing a high percentage of organization doing it yet, but this will come once we haven't GA'd this internally. That will come in the next couple of months, but we have all the stuff in place. But we're seeing designers and PMs picking up bugs directly from the Jira tickets, pushing them in, something we haven't seen before. And there's just an appetite for everybody to just join. So in fact, the biggest thing right now is everybody wants access. Everybody wants access to the tools to be able to do it together. And we just want to make sure it's good enough to make sure the whole organization can do it really well.
So how is it that you're piloting it? Is it there's some number of people have access to these agents and they just work the way they've worked with access to these tools? Or is there like a team dedicated, this is the way you work now and this is it, and we'll see what happens?
So it's very cool. So basically we have a team building. That's the core team building kind of the FSB track across all of R&D, FSB full stack builder. And then there are pockets and pods of teams using it. So basically we are looking at specific areas that we're basically giving it to. The condition there is they give feedback. As a response for that, they make the tool better. So it's not just access. We want people who will use it. So one of your early adopters would be the ones who help you shape the product really well. So we're doing this in a pod model right now.
So it's like a pod within a larger team, like a designer, PM, engineer kind of group within a... Is there an example you can give, like a part of LinkedIn that's trying this out?
Yeah. So, if I think about some of our teams, whether it's actually we just launched semantic people search and the semantic job search as well. That team was using part of those tools to actually help build it. So that team this was PMs building their own dashboards with those tools without waiting for design resources to come in. Then we have a design team who is now already, this started really from the manager kind of rolling this out. And in many ways, what I tell this team is don't wait for the official GA, start doing it, start kind of leaning in. We're seeing designers on that team starting to push kind of PRs, which never happened before. And now other teams, they want to do this as well. So it's starting with this kind of grassroots experience. I would say there's the places have been very formal. I would say the beginning has been the top. The product executive teams, basically we moved from functional leaders, design, PM, BD, and so on to product areas leaders, and they basically rock across the stack. And they also go for a 360 with all of those functions to see if they're really able to do a full stack building experience. Then we're also launching at kind of like the junior side, a new program called the Associate Product Builder Program, where we used to have our APM program, which it's ending this year. And then starting January, we're going to start having our APB program. And they're going to come into LinkedIn. We're going to teach them how to code, design, and PM at LinkedIn. They're going to go through a pretty rigorous training process, and then they're going to join those pods. And gradually, we're going to grow that program to be a material part of LinkedIn as well.
Wow. So this might be the future of the APM program, is this full stack builder APM-ish program.
In many ways, we've built some pretty amazing, I'm really excited for that group. I wish I could join it. We build amazing training for them. And in many ways, we're going to use that training to think about how we roll it across the organization. We're kind of using the lens of, you have great technical skills, but you're not, an engineer at a company yet, or you have great design taste, but you haven't designed at scale in company yet. And we're going to teach you how to do it at LinkedIn. But the training we're going to use a lot to kind of extend across the company as well.
Okay, so you have these programs, these pilots, and these pods, and you said what you're looking at to see if this is something you roll out is experiment velocity times quality times time.
Divided by time.
Divided by time. Okay,
yeah.
Got it. And I guess, I know it's early, but just, you said you're seeing that it's saving teams a few hours a week at this point, something like that?
Yeah, and I think the feedback has been the most important part, right? When you kind of, the way to think about this is just like you build a product. So we're building this product internally, and you want to experiment with some kind of early adopters who will give you feedback, and the feedback has been amazing. In fact, our top talent are the ones who are using this the most at LinkedIn. And the feedback from them has been incredible in terms, because they're also willing to spend the time and give the feedback as well. And the response from them has been incredible in terms of like the quality of their output, the time they're spending on this to get the value back, their desire to kind of be part of this and actually scale this and make this even better. So that's where a lot of the excitement has been from how they're using it and the quality we've seen there. I would say in 6 months or so, we'll be able to see a lot more of the organization use it, and you'll start seeing kind of those top line numbers will grow as well.
That is a really interesting insight, that the top performers are finding the most success, because there's always been this question, is AI going to just make people that are not amazing more amazing, or is it going to make amazing people even more amazing? And it sounds like it's likely the latter.
Yes, and it's in many ways, it's surprising, it's not surprising. I've seen this also when we were... It's surprising because you want everybody else to be part of this and lean in. I think top talent has this tendency of continuously trying to get better at their craft, and this innate need to be at the cutting edge of how you build. And I think we're seeing this here as well. This is why I've had this phrase I say with the team that if we build all those tools, will they use it? And I know right now the answer is no. It's not enough to give them the tools to use it. You have to build the incentives programs, the motivation, the examples to how you do it. They need to see other people being successful as well. And I've seen this also when we're shifting LinkedIn from a desktop company to a mobile company. It was a very similar process. It's very hard. Change management here is going to be a critical part. I see a lot of companies roll out their agents and just expecting companies to adopt. doesn't work this way. Some will adapt. That tends to be kind of your cutting edge 5% of talent that just wants new tools and they have a bias for change. But the vast majority needs to work for change management in how they do it. And that requires being a lot more thoughtful about the cultural aspect of it, which is by far for me the biggest and most important thing to do.
Yeah, I want to spend time there. And it's very, like, it makes a lot of sense why people don't spend time here because they have so much to do. They got to ship things. Their days are already busy. You have to now carve out time to learn this new tool that'll not pay off for a while. So I get why people are like, okay, I'll get there. I'll use it someday. But, they don't. This idea of culture, this is when I saw you kind of share this initially, this is the third piece of making this successful. So there's like the platform of getting the code base ready for people, for AI to work with. Then there's the tool, like these agents you've talked about. And then there's the culture. Is there more there that you can share of just like what has actually worked in helping get people on board? One thing I heard is like creating a little bit of FOMO of like, okay, only a few people can use this and you have to sign up to get access. What's worked in getting people to get on board?
Yeah, I think this is where I emphasize to people that getting everything done, the platforms, the tools, is not going to be sufficient. It's a prerequisite for this to work, but not sufficient for this to work. Because it really requires you to invest a lot in the cultural aspects of how do you get people to lean into this one. And this one might feel slow at first, but I've seen this before with our transformation of thinking from desktop to mobile. And once it picks up, it actually maintains very high velocity. One, people are really incentivized by how you define expectations for them. So to think about what is the expectation of somebody in the role.
Whatever, so changing performance review sort of things.
Very much so. So everything from how you hire to, calibration and evaluation. And one thing I want to see there early is this kind of AI agency and fluency. Like I mentioned, the tools are there. The question is, would you use them? Because the tools will be good enough, but not great at the beginning, right? That's the classic thing of every good MVP tool. They're good enough, but they're not great. And then you kind of want to build that agency to make the tool better. Like we're in this kind of notion of we're going to make this better for LinkedIn together. 2 is piloting success inside of your organization. That's the pod model where you're showing that, not only this could work, it's actually having success. So we have even our partnerships team, our BD team, being able to kind of go instead of like relying on waiting for an engineer to help build the developer portal and build kind of the connectors there. Literally, one of our head of partnerships just went and did it himself. Didn't even delegate to his team. And the goal is to say like, hey, I can do it. You can do it as well. Those examples are really, really powerful. I talked about the associate product builder program where we are going to be very focused on training. I think that will send a really strong message across the organization. People will see this talent and what they can do. And I think that will create that movement. But celebrating wins in all hands, highlighting people and showing those examples. One example we've seen recently, people really looked at it in a surprise lens, but then it kind of, I think, really opened up a lens for them. We had somebody in our user research team. We had an opening for a PM on the growth team, and we kind of, that role was open for a while, and she said, I think I can do it. And she used all these tools. This is a user researcher becoming a growth PM, not usually the career path you see, but she was excited about the area. She used all those tools, and she's now a growth PM on the team. So, and really, you can start thinking about her more as a full stack builder ultimately. But seeing those openings and then highlighting those to people, actually people are doing this, has been a great example of it. And then just making sure that those tools are accessible, people can provide feedback, you share a lot, has been an incredible part of this. It's not enough to be top-down directive that this is how we want to work. People want to feel like there are success stories. They feel like it's worth their time. It feels it's a movement they want to be part of. And then ultimately they can see successes in how they do it.
I love this kind of comparison to the shift to mobile. That's like we all went through that, and there's all these stories of companies requiring you to show mobile mocks. That's like the only way we're going to operate now. Everything you have to ship has to be on mobile. And it's interesting how similar this is to them, to that experience. And so a few things you just shared here, just to kind of summarize some of the things that have worked for you. Showing wins, celebrating wins, showing people what other folks are doing with AI tools. creating a program that people enroll into and make it a little bit exclusive. This performance review piece is really interesting because that really will change people's behaviors. Here's how we get promoted. Have you actually already made that change to the PM? Or is it, I guess it's every track, I imagine, not just product management. Have you already made that change, or is it kind of like a work in progress?
So there was two aspects to it. Once I moved my team, my directs, we did 360 for them. So their 360 was, if you came from PM, you had the designers on your team rate you. So that had its own, and then we shared those with them, and that had its own kind of motivation. But then we broadly took it across. So when we hire right now, we look for those, and then this upcoming cycle we do a biannual. That's going to be part of the performance evaluation piece, and we announce it to everybody. And for what it's for, people are excited to show, and they're excited to know how they're going to be. It's always about I want to know how I'm being rated or evaluated. Yeah. So just being able to show those examples has been a big part of it. The other thing I would say, it takes time for this program in its formality to roll out across the entire organization. And I was intentionally not trying to be quick at rolling this out to everybody, because I think that just dilutes the value of it really quickly, because it's not about, I could care less about your title. I care about how you work. So calling you a full stack builder is not what I'm looking for. Changing your mindset to a full stack mindset is what I'm looking for. You're thinking you can do the whole thing. You're looking at those tools and looking at how to do it. So one of the things I've said is, if you're looking for a formal reorg or declaration to start building differently, you're waiting too long. My biggest thing is, here's a permission for me to just not wait and just go. So whether or not you have the right tools or not, go build the tool, use a tool from the outside, bring it in, show those examples. In many ways, prove that you're a full stack builder in mindset before anything else comes to mind. And that just naturally will happen. And that's also where we've seen some of our best talent just goes and leans a lot into.
I love that. I was going to actually mention that quote. Someone you work with told me exactly that quote you just shared. So I'm glad you brought it up, of just, if you're waiting for a reorg, you're not thinking about it the right way. How do you encourage people to actually play with these tools on their own? Are you just go take a few days to play with AI? Is it just try it? Or is there anything formal you've seen of just getting people to more try this on their own without joining this program?
A lot of the tools we've made, we've been sharing them regularly. We've done a few of my all hands have been all about how to use those tools. But then at the same time, we're kind of inviting, have you found a new tool that works really well for you? Share it, show it. Again, it could be Slack, could be messages, Teams, and so on, how you do it. But the idea is really to start getting that investment in how things work. Actually, I think in general, you can feel overwhelmed by tools right now, by recipes and how to do things. What's your prompt and what's my prompt? But really, it's finding something that kind of works really well, that you can gravitate around and kind of really invest in. That's been those areas. But I think we've had this invitation to go and explore and go and bring in stuff that you think are great. And in many ways, bring others along on the journey. It's one good way to kind of make the influence much bigger than a few folks who are doing really well with this.
Are there any surprises on the negative side that have come out of this, of PRD is just feeling AI driven, people slowing down unexpectedly? Is there anything that surprised you of just okay, this is actually not great?
Yeah, we mentioned a few of them. I was hoping for some tools to work off the shelf really well. Was never the case. So we had to invest quite a lot.
Never the case.
Never the case. We had to invest quite a lot. And again, part of it is we just have a lot of legacy information and code base and knowledge and designs and so on. So if, a lot of the companies we work with are seeing this as a great growth opportunity for them as well to invest. But I do think it's a big area of investment as well. We talked about not just giving access to all of your context, which we started with. And we were oh, here's access to all the drive, all information. Failed miserably. And hallucinates like crazy. People gravitating towards different tools. Our goal was to converge on tools, but that was pretty hard. And then I think in terms of quality, we've just seen better quality. But I think it's because, again, where we are in the stage is still the early adopters, and they're doing a few iterations in terms of how to do it. But I would say the tooling adoption is hard. And then I think for some people, this is important for me to kind of state, some people do not want to be full stack builders. And that's completely okay. Some people see themselves in specialization, and I think specialization has a place and a role. So I didn't want the message to be across the organization. I expect everybody to be a full stack builder. I do not. I think there are system builders that empower full stack builders, and then you have people who are specialized. But I don't think we need as many specialized people as we did in the past.
I didn't actually realize this until just now. So is this like their title now? Instead of product manager engineer, they're full stack builder?
We have a full stack builder title formally inside of the organization,
Wow.
and we are gradually putting
Yeah.
people in that bucket.
So there's a whole career ladder that's forming. There's a whole, okay, that's a bigger deal than I even thought. So where are you finding these folks mostly coming from? Like product engineering, design? I imagine it's a mix, but just is there a kind of most common trend?
It's a mix. I would kind of, people listening, I would just think about like, just go over your org and imagine who can do it. Who can right now flex across those functions, whether it's engineering, design, product, even BD. And what you'll find is there's already quite a few it can flex across.
Interesting. Are there any functions you think are especially successful at this? Not to play any favorites, but I don't know. Are you finding like, okay, or you could also not highlight any specific?
No, I think it's a mental model of how you do it. I think, if I were to play like what's the hardest craft to potentially learn, I think design has a lot more work to get the design agents to be really, really good. So I think designers have a little bit of a leg up in terms of others learning their craft, and then the vice versa. But I honestly think it's a mindset. I've seen designers code. I've seen PMs kind of design and do well. And this is why I think like when you kind of step back and you think about people in your organization and who can flex, I think you'll see them show up in many areas. And what I think you'll find there is they have the agency, they're leaning into new things, they have the fluency, like they're already building new experiences, and they have that growth mindset that they just want to get better. So it doesn't matter what they learn at school or what label somebody put on them when they join the company.
What I love about a lot of this is it's the easiest time to transition between different product roles than it's ever been. Design's moving to PM or just moving to this new role. It's like, it makes it so much easier to, like you said, that researcher became a growth PM.
And this is probably my biggest advice/motivation I give to the team, because what I tell them is ultimately, by the way, this is for me as well. Like I think about it in the same way. It's the incentives for you are so aligned with the organization of what we're asking for, right? Because this is we need you to change. We want to be a more agile, adaptive, resilient organization that can deal with the pace of change. But you want as well for your own career. You want to be at the cutting edge of how you build. So the incentives are really aligned between what you need for your own career and what the organization needs you to do. So there's that permission to go and do it, for me, is ideally kind of a tailwind in what they want to do more than anything else.
Maybe a last question for people that are inspired and like, okay, this is what we need to be doing. Any just tips for someone starting down this road to be successful at trying something like this at their company?
I would say I would start with the notion of like, how do you want to bring, like, there's just structure. I would think about the platform you need to build, the tools you want to bring, and then I would spend a lot of time on the culture. Platform and tools, I think, would be, again, a prerequisite, but not sufficient. And the culture aspect is really important. I would think a lot about how you bring people along. So for one of the learnings we had that probably I will do differently right now if I were to redo this program was, for a while, I was working very closely with my core team on it, the core kind of full stack building team that were in charge of building all this material. But the organization was always asking questions: what's going on? Who is doing it? What are the tools? And in retrospect, we could have done a lot more in the flow to just show them and get them to already use early tools or be aware of it, versus doing a small team on the side. So it's okay to start with a small team. I think it's really important, but at the same time, just making sure there's like visibility across the whole thing is really powerful. Being patient and being willing to invest. I always give this example of like, we always give this example of like, oh, look at this startup. They built this in a week. Yes, you can build a startup in a week right now if you start from scratch. It's actually not hard. But when you are trying to transform a large organization, you want to have this impatient about the goal, and you have to have a high ambition, but being very thoughtful and patient about how you bring it to life and the key things you have to invest in. If you don't invest in your platform, I just don't see how this could be a successful outcome. If you don't invest in customizing the tools for you, then you're just going to get vanilla generic agents from the outside. So being aware of the investment and making sure you actually allocate resource to it. This is kind of the classic, be willing to invest up front so you can reap the benefit after, versus saying, hey, why am I not seeing us moving into 2x the productivity in a week? That's not going to be this way. You can see it with some people, but starting to collect those examples and starting to really think about the transformation is really key.
This is so incredibly cool. I know that a lot of CPOs and heads of product and all kinds of leaders are reaching out to you, trying to figure out what you've learned, how to do this. So I love that we went deep on all these things. Just final question, is there anything else that we haven't shared that you think might be helpful for listeners to hear, or maybe just to double down on before we get to our very exciting lightning round?
Whether you're in an organization, you're waiting for your leader to roll this out, or you're a leader trying to roll this out, I would not wait. Like the first thing I've done, which I thought in retrospect was really helpful, is I did announce this up front. We are going to this mode. Like, we're starting in pockets, we're starting in pods, we're building the tools, but we're going to, this is the mountain we're going to go after. And in many ways, we're going to make it great. I also announced that this is not just an end state, it's a kind of continuous progress. There's no state we're going to get to as much as continuously just trying to be better. And in many ways, to compete, you just want to be better than others in how you build, because the version of building will completely just transform itself every few years or so. So do not wait. Really focus on the progress you're making. Over-communicate with your team, not just the vision, but also the progress you're making, almost like holding yourself responsible. If you're a leader, give yourself KPIs you share with your own teams, or OKRs. And if you're inside an organization, and I would say whether or not your CPO or your CEO is announcing this type of program, go do it, or join an organization that does it. So you can be at the cutting edge of how you build in the future.
Tomer, with that, we've reached our very exciting lightning round. I've got 5 questions for you. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
First question, what are 2 or 3 books you find yourself recommending most to other people?
I love to gift trios of books that I really like. So my current trio is, they're very diverse in topics. So apologies if it's not falling all into tech. But the first one is called Why Nations Fail. It's a book I read a decade ago, even more. And the authors of it just won the Nobel Prize last year. And it basically talks about why does some nations succeed and some fail. And it's not the usual explanations we go for, which is, oh, it's culture, it's natural resources, it's the kind of religion. This is, it's a lot of those kind of tends to be the kind of immediate excuses people have. It kind of falls into 2 camps. Are they extractive or inclusive institutions? Can people participate broadly and opportunities shared, or they are institutions that basically are supposed to be attracting from many and give to some? So it's just an incredible way to just think about how you build a nation. And for us at LinkedIn, we think a lot about the idea of opportunities, so how you build a product as well. And it's just a good way to kind of move away from easy explanations into like what really makes a country really successful as well. Second book, it's called Outlive. It's really about kind of the idea. It's kind of like, the author Peter Attia talks about the idea of medicine 3.0, which is really the notion of like building personalized medicine, which I think in the world of AI will become incredible in the future. But it's all those, it's called as categories that you should think about for your life, so you can just optimize your health as much as possible. And it goes for everything through, fitness to diet to kind of the biggest health factors you should think about. But it's a great long book.
And then lastly, in my bookshelf behind me.
Here you go.
It's up top. You can't actually see it, I think.
And then lastly, it's a book that also came out many years ago, but it's called The Beginning of Infinity, which I really like, by Deutsch. And it wasn't an easy read for me, but I love the idea. In fact, especially in products, I love the idea of cause and effect, like really finding great explanations for how things happen, and then building on top of that your next iterations. And this book really pushes on the idea of explanations, that only once we have a clear understanding of what things happen, then we can have breakthroughs on top of that. But until we get to a point of clear scientific breakthroughs, we are not going to make significant progress. But when you do that, it's really almost like infinite progress you can make on top of that.
Naval's always talking about that last book. I think I bought it, and it was a hard
not an
read.
easy read, at least for me. It wasn't an easy read, but it's a very powerful read.
Awesome. Is there a favorite recent movie or TV show you really enjoyed?
Can I do a podcast?
Absolutely.
So there's a podcast it's in Hebrew. It's called One Song. And it takes a song that, generally is ideally popular and then goes really deep on the origin and the history of the song. And I love it. I love music and just dissects songs so well. It does a great job also in kind of bringing to life the story behind it. So for me, it just goes back to like you thought the song was about something, but then it goes really deep into the actors behind the song. And sometimes it's the words chosen or it's the how the lyrics match the music itself. And I just really enjoy that one.
There's a podcast called Song Exploder, I believe, that is a similar concept that's not in Hebrew, in English, that I'll point people to if you love that one.
It's awesome.
Is there a product you've recently discovered that you really love? Could be an app, could be some clothing, could be a kitchen gadget, tech gadget.
Can it be a product I want to have, which I think is actually really easy to do?
I love that. This is product thinking 101, just the vision of what you want to see.
So in my car right now, there's Alexa built in, which is great because the kids can ask for songs all day long, and it's a whole show inside of the car. But one of my favorite things to do I've been doing it for well over 2 years, is I go in and I go into voice mode.
Or ChatGPT.
Yeah, ChatGPT, and then we just have a conversation. And that's just friction. I would love to have on my steering wheel a button that invokes my AI friend that can sit next to me in the passenger seat. And I just think that would be I actually think it will transform rides for people. Just that movement, that's just like elimination of friction will transform the experience for me.
On that note, I recently discovered Teslas actually do this now. If you hold the right wheel, Grok appears and you could talk to Grok.
Huh.
So it's here. The
Okay.
AI has arrived. Yeah, I was just like, did it by accident. And then it's okay,
Great.
cool.
So for me,
Yeah.
if anybody from Rivian is listening, please bring us to
All
the
right.
car.
Rivian's falling behind. Yeah. And it's and you have to use Grok. It'd be cool if you could switch to different AIs just because it has like a personality. Like just give me information. I don't need you to laugh and give me jokes.
Did you need to spend some time with it before, or did it have any memory did you bring any memory into it?
There's a logged out version, and then you could just log in and it connects to your account. Yeah, it's extremely cool. No one's talking about it. It's crazy because I don't know if they launched it fully, but it just appeared.
Do you talk in the car a lot to it?
I don't use it that much, to be honest, but I should. My wife just doesn't love Grok. I think the brand of Grok is like a specific brand. And so she's like, don't talk to Grok in here with me.
I love voice mode, so I use it all the time.
Yeah, I love voice mode too. It just interrupts too often. That's the issue there, right? It's just
You can, by the way, you can set it up. You can basically say like, hey, just
Oh.
like let me
I did
finish.
not know that. I'm learning so much. Okay, 2 more questions. Do you have a life motto that you often find useful in work or in life?
I think last time I talked about that, I most associated here with, I might be wrong, but I'm not confused, although I don't say it as much anymore. But I think the one I love, growth mindset is like a second religion for us at home. And one thing I love about, there's like a phrase there that is becoming is better than being, which I think ties into the FSB mode a little bit, which is you're always in, progress mode, iteration mode. It's not about reaching a state. It's about the journey, the process. That's what you should fall in love with. It's about continuously growing and evolving without the negativity of it, or there's no sense of FOMO there. It's just this continuous thing. If I look back a year from now and I look back, how much did I grow? Like, how much do I know? What skills did I gain? Like, where am I becoming better? Like, how do I feel like, Tomer version 2026 versus 2025? What's the delta there? And I kind of love that as a way of thinking.
A great segue to our final question. by the time this episode comes out, it won't be a secret that you're leaving LinkedIn after 14 years, a legendary run. You joined way before the acquisition. You helped them integrate. You just like the way LinkedIn was perceived 14 years ago is so radically different from the way it is today. Like it's actually really fun and interesting to be there versus how people for a long time felt about LinkedIn. So I guess the question is just how you feeling and what's next. What I imagine you're going to get a lot of calls from a lot of people, but what are you planning?
Yeah, so I feel proud. It's been an incredible ride at LinkedIn. The way I've got to know about LinkedIn deeply the very first time was when I moved to the Valley, and I, went to a lecture at Stanford about social networks in 2008, and Reed was there, and he talked about the power of being professional communities online, and I was very nerdy about it and thought it was an incredible vision. Had no plans to join, and actually started my own company after, but as luck would have it, found myself joining a few years after, and just thought the mission was incredible. So in many ways, it aligned with my purpose, and just was an incredible ride to be here. And I also feel very grateful. I shared this with the company recently. I was starting to take learnings from my experiences here. A lot of it from tough situations. We had a lot of tough situations at LinkedIn, and hard calls and late nights. But you learn so much from those, and I'm just incredibly grateful. And I'm excited. I have a bias for change. I have a bias for kind of positioning myself in a place where I can learn the most and learn a lot. And it's incredible. It's an incredible time to build. So I'm just excited to be thinking of new problem sets and new areas where I can go deep on and invest the next decade in.
I think it's going to take a long time for you to not feel like you're working at LinkedIn and to like forget about all the things that you have been worrying about for so many years.
After you build something for such a long time, and I think you and I talked about it at one point, that I think one of the best traits for a builder is to become very passionate with what they're building. Really care, not about the job. It's really care about the product. When you feel the pain when somebody complains, and you kind of have this continuous discontent, and it's like, for me, it's the notion of raising a baby. So yeah, it's hard. It will be hard. I will always think of LinkedIn as one of the babies I helped grow.
Well, I'm excited to have you back someday when you figure out what you want to do next or start whatever you're doing. I love that this was an excuse to get to know you. Tomer, thank you so much for being here.
It was great to be here. Thanks, Lenny.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the podcast. You can find all past episodes or learn more about the show at lennyspodcast.com. See you in the next episode. Everyone's always complaining, SEO's dead, it can't grow, word of mouth is so hard.
All of the ingredients for a new distribution platform are essentially happening. My prediction, the new distribution platform will be ChatGPT. There's a bunch of signals that they're about to launch that.
This is a huge opportunity for companies to get on it.
It ends up being a prisoner's dilemma. Don't trick yourself into thinking that you can't play the game. The cycles seem to be getting shorter and shorter, so you actually have a smaller amount of time. If you don't do it, your competitors are going to go to the new platform and your customer expectations change. There is no opting out of the game.
This is the opportunity to disrupt an incumbent.
If you're a late stage company, you place multiple bets. For startups, it's a totally different ballgame. You have to choose one and go all in.
Think about companies like Zynga that grew on Facebook and then became massive companies.
Building a great product is one of those things that's necessary, but not sufficient. And actually, the separation is between those that build really great distribution.
What would be the backup if not ChatGPT?
My hypothesis of who's best positioned would actually be.
Today, my guest is Brian Balfour. Brian is the founder and CEO of Reforge, a company that I've been a longtime fan and advocate of. Historically, Reforge has focused primarily on teaching courses on product and growth. But more recently, they've transitioned to building their own products, including a product called Reforge Insights and a bunch more really cool stuff coming very soon. Prior to Reforge, Brian led growth at HubSpot. And over the course of his career, he has seen the rise and fall of every major distribution channel, including Facebook's ad platform, Google Ads and SEO, and the Apple App Store. Based on what he's seeing, he is predicting the emergence of a brand new and powerful distribution channel that will likely arise in the next 6 months, centered most likely around ChatGPT. It is really rare for a new growth channel to open up. It's been a long time since the last one appeared, and the people who recognize this and hop on it early are the ones that reap the most rewards. So this is a huge deal. In this conversation, Brian shares what he's predicting, what he's seeing, why this is a big deal, and what you should be doing about it right now. I highly recommend you listen to this full conversation and discuss the ramifications with your team. If you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and follow it in your favorite podcasting app or YouTube. Also, if you become an annual subscriber of my newsletter, you get a bunch of incredible products for free for 1 year, including Lovable, Replit, Bolt, N8N, Linear, Superhuman, Descript, Whisperflow, Gamma, Perplexity, Warp, Granola, Magic Patterns, Raycast, ChatPRD, and Mobbin. Check it out at lennysnewsletter.com and click Product Pass. With that, I bring you Brian Balfour. Today's episode is brought to you by DX, the developer intelligence platform designed by leading researchers. To thrive in the AI era, organizations need to adapt quickly. But many organization leaders struggle to answer pressing questions like, which tools are working? How are they being used? What's actually driving value? DX provides the data and insights that leaders need to navigate this shift. With DX, companies like Dropbox, Booking.com, Adyen, and Intercom get a deep understanding of how AI is providing value to their developers and what impact AI is having on engineering productivity. To learn more, visit DX's website at getdx.com/Lenny. That's getdx.com/Lenny. This episode is brought to you by Basecamp. Basecamp is the famously straightforward project management system from 37 Signals. Most project management systems are either inadequate or frustratingly complex, but Basecamp is refreshingly clear. It's simple to get started, easy to organize, and Basecamp's visual tools help you see exactly what everyone is working on and how all work is progressing. Keep all your files and conversations about projects directly connected to the projects themselves so that you always know where stuff is and you're not constantly switching contexts. Running a business is hard. Managing your projects should be easy. I've been a longtime fan of what 37 Signals has been up to, and I'm really excited to be sharing this with you. Sign up for a free account at basecamp.com/Lenny. Get somewhere with Basecamp. Brian, thank you so much for being here and welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited for this one.
I'm really excited to have you back. We're just going to dive right in. Essentially, you've uncovered a really important trend or insight about how products are going to grow differently in the future, how growth is changing. And this is something that I think a lot of people need to hear. So I asked you to come on to share what you're seeing. I also think this is just very timely. I think you said you're going to say in the next 6 months, things might significantly change. So I'm really excited to do this. We're going to spend this whole conversation on this insight. To set us up, what is just the big idea? What's the high level idea here?
Just like you, I've spent my whole career just really passionate about startups, figuring out how to build products that win, that emerge in new markets. And one of the things that I have learned over time, or one of the things you hear a lot is from a lot of folks is to win, you have to like really build a great product. A lot of the advice kind of boils down to that. And one of the things that I feel like I've banged my head against the wall in a lot of ways in my career is actually telling people that building a great product is one of those things that's necessary, but not sufficient. And actually the separation is between those that build really great distribution. And so this general partner, his name's Alex Rampel. He's at Andreessen Horowitz. Actually wrote this blog post 10 years ago, back in I think 2015. In the essence of the blog post, he basically says one thing, which is that startups is a game of trying to get distribution before the incumbent can copy, right? So it's this kind of concept of escape velocity. And so, on that note, right, which I think is like a very good summary of like what you're trying to do in a startup in distribution, is that we're right now living in this environment where that game of startups kind of getting distribution faster than the incumbent has gotten way harder in a lot of ways. And in some small cases has gotten a little bit easier. But if we think about this, the way that it's gotten harder, and some of the things that probably a lot of founders or folks working on the growth side have probably feel is that, one is that incumbents can copy faster these days, right? So that window that you have to get that escape velocity has actually shrunk. It's decreased. The second thing is that a lot of the organic distribution that we've had, especially over the past few years, has really shrunk as well. So everybody's talking about the decline of SEO and, clicks declining, but you also see it in some other cases, right? A lot of these social platforms don't really let you send as much traffic to sites. LinkedIn just changed their algorithm, which has really dropped organic distribution. Obviously, the Twitter to X transition that happened, right? Like TikTok's almost always been like that. And then the third way that it's gotten harder is that AI is really good at writing software, right? And code generation. And so everybody's kind of feeling this infinite increase of competition, especially at the startup level. And, YC's pumping out 6 of the same thing every single cohort, right? Like that's what it literally feels like. So it's gotten way harder. This game, this escape velocity game, has gotten a lot harder. It's gotten easier in some very exceptional cases, like a Cursor or something, where AI has kind of been like the spark. I know you wrote the blog post about the race car engine, and I think you said like there's like the spark plug in the engine, right? And so AI kind of really created that a new type of spark, a new type of interest of early adopters to fuel some new players in a short period of time, right? And so it's amazing to see something like Cursor overtake market share of something like GitHub Copilot in 9 months or less, right? Like that's how fast it happened. It's kind of crazy. But the main thing that people need to understand is, okay, well, if that's the game I'm playing, right? How to get escape velocity before the incumbent? Like, what are all the ways to do that? And to really figure that out. And there's multiple ways that this can happen. But one of the major ways that we always see is that this can happen when new distribution platforms emerge. And because when new distribution platforms emerge, startups are usually the fastest to take advantage of them. It's slower for the incumbents to move. It gives startups this opportunity, essentially, to play this game. So Casey Winters wrote this blog post about 2 years ago, maybe like 18 months ago, about the AI technology shift. And his key point was the AI technology shift has been a technology shift that has not come with the distribution shift yet. So if you look historically, we've had a bunch of technology shifts from, the internet to the cloud to mobile to social, like all of these different types of things. And some of them come with new distribution platforms, new ways to distribute products, and some of them don't. But the most powerful ones, the most impactful ones are the ones that do come with these new distribution platforms. And so his second key point was that these two things don't actually happen at once. Usually you get the technology shift, then you get the distribution shift a little bit later. So now we're a couple years from that post. We are a couple years into AI technology shift. And one of the things that I am seeing is all of the conditions, all of the ingredients for a new distribution platform to emerge are essentially happening. And so I think we're at an inflection point where we're going to see this emerge really fast. And the key thing for everybody to know is that as new distribution platforms emerge, they follow the same 4-step cycle. And it's kind of a game that you're playing, that everybody's playing. And so just like any game, you kind of need to know the rules of the game. You need to know the steps of the game in order to have any sort of opportunity to win. And that's kind of like the thing that I've lived through, once again, both painfully and also in good ways. And is something that I'm keeping my eye on and something that I've been talking about. So before we go into that, 4-step cycle, I figure I'll pause there to see if you have any follow-up questions on that.
Okay, this is amazing. So essentially what you're saying is we've had all these ways to grow. There's SEO, there's paid growth, there's sales. All these channels have been around for a long time. They're extremely saturated. Everyone's always complaining SEO's dead. It can't grow with SEO anymore. It can't grow. Word of mouth is so hard. There's so many amazing things now. That's hard. Paid is so hard. It's just all this money.
Tax are rising. Yeah,
exactly.
All these things. Yeah.
So all these saturated channels. And what you're saying is there's an emerging new channel that has not yet been saturated. And this is a huge opportunity for companies to get on it. And you'll talk about timing because it's a little tricky to even know exactly when to go big on this.
That's right. Yeah.
But that's a huge deal. This has been a long time since there's a new way to grow that you can actually use as a lever for growth and not just hope for the best. Okay.
Yeah. That's right.
Before you get into the cycles, do you want to tease what the answer is just to give people a little hint, or do you want to keep it secret?
Well, to be clear, right? So my prediction we don't have a clear winner yet. My prediction of the new distribution platform will be ChatGPT. In some ways that people probably already think it's happening, in some ways that it won't. But the thing that is less important, or that is more important than whether I have predicted the exact winner correctly, the thing that's more important is to understand the cycle and evaluate how to determine where you want to place your bets and how to place those bets, which I know we'll talk about, because I could be wrong about the ChatGPT prediction and what's going to happen there. I think there's going to be two parts of it. There's going to be what they do with a ChatGPT search experience, but I think the bigger thing will be whatever they do with launching a third-party platform on top of ChatGPT. There's a bunch of signals that they're about to launch that. I'm pretty sure it's going to be ChatGPT. The thing I'm way more sure about is that some new distribution platform will emerge, and it will follow the same 4-step cycle. That's kind of the key. So could be wrong on the first piece. I am very confident on the second piece.
Okay, excellent foreshadowing. I completely agree. If it's anything, it would be ChatGPT at this point. Let's get into it. What are the cycles that platforms generally follow?
Yeah, and I'll give some examples of this, but let me explain the first 4 steps of the cycle first, and then we'll go through a bunch of examples of all those individual steps. So the 4 steps are essentially, one is I call a step 0. It's the conditions of the market have been met. Step 1 is about a moat. Step 2 is about a platform opening, and step 3 is about the platform closing for control and monetization. So let me kind of briefly explain each one. Step 0 is about the competitive market being met, the conditions being met. And there's a few pieces of this. One is that typically what happens is that there is consensus that there is going to be this new huge category, right? Think social, think mobile, all those types of things. And in this case, right, these AI chat platforms like a ChatGPT or a Claude. So there's consensus about that, but there's no clear winner yet. And you typically have somewhere between 5 to 7, major players really battling it out, right? So, and they're all kind of looking for what is the edge, what is the thing that is going to help me win? Because all of these dynamics, in all the history, they either end up in monopolies or duopolies, right? And so the stakes are really large, and so the competition is fierce. So that's kind of step 0. And I think we could all agree that we are in that mode, right now. We've got OpenAI battling with Claude, battling with Gemini, and Google with whatever Meta comes out with their new team, so on and so forth. And there's huge amounts of capital, there's consensus, all the types. They are in a fierce competition. So that's step 0. Step 1 is then these players, somebody essentially identifies whatever the moat is, the thing that is going to help build them defensibility and help them hit escape velocity and become that monopoly or duopoly in that single category. And once they figure out what that moat is, then they need to press the advantage, right? They need to figure out how to gather that moat as fast as humanly possible. And it tends to be that you can't do that by yourself. And so you kind of need the help of an ecosystem in order to gather more of that moat. And that typically comes down to third-party content creators or app developers and other businesses. And so they all establish like a third-party platform, right, that has some incentives built in. And usually the value exchange is, hey, you develop on top of my platform, right? You add more use cases, more engagement, like all of these things to my platform. And in exchange, I'm going to give you something in return. And usually that thing that's in exchange is I'm going to give you some new form of distribution for your application and for your business. But what essentially happens as we go over time is that we go into step 3, which is the closing period, which is at some point, all of these companies end up starting to lock down the platform. And this tends to happen for reasons of like monetization and growth, right? They either competitively don't want, somebody to use their own, platform to disrupt themselves. Like we saw that in the early Twitter days with things like Vine and Periscope, right? Like shutting those things down unceremoniously, right? Or they need to find ways to monetize at a deeper and deeper level because all these companies, like they have to grow. And, Google's the classic example here of just more and more real estate has either been taken up by either ads or their own, first party applications. And so that's the key is like they close it down by doing one of a few things. They either shut it down entirely, 2, they develop their own first party applications to absorb the highest use cases, or 3, they artificially depress the organic distribution that they gave you in the step prior to push you towards paid mechanisms in order to monetize. And so I think we should go through like multiple examples here, but that's kind of like the core essence of the 4 steps. And so I'll pause there.
Awesome. So it's essentially figure out what's going to create defensibility long-term. What's your moat? Bring everyone in. Hey, everyone, welcome to Facebook. Everyone joins Facebook and then, and all the developers build on Facebook to bring in more people on Facebook. And then they're like, okay, now you got to pay. There's a toll. But you love this so much and you're so hooked, all your friends are here. You may as well stick around.
That's right.
Amazing. Okay. So yeah, a few examples would be great.
Yeah. So you just hit on the first one. This is the first one that I always think about because this is where I learned about this cycle very early in my career. Like one of my first companies was during the whole the Facebook platform boom, social gaming, all of those applications, and I lived the full cycle in a very short period. I lived the glory days and just the absolute horror days, and it was very painful. But this is exactly what happened. So let's go through the 4 steps. So step 0, Facebook was in a brutal battle with MySpace, Friendster, and a few others. People forget this. People forget that there was actually like a bunch of competitors at that time. And in fact, those competitors were bigger than Facebook at the time. They had more users back in 2007 when Facebook launched their third-party platform. But one of the key things is that Facebook was very early to the insight about the direct network effects and that there's going to create real lock-in that the more friends, the more of the global network that was on there, the more that it was just going to feed and hit this escape velocity. And so at the time they launched their platform, I think they were maybe like 1/4, 1/5 the size of, something like MySpace or even Friendster, Orkut. Like these are some of the names at that time. But they opened up their third-party platform. And what was the value exchange? They went to third-party developers and they said, okay, we've created this canvas. They used to call it the canvas. And they were like, you can put anything in the canvas that you want, an app, a game, whatever. You can monetize in any way you want. We just want this sidebar real estate on the ads. That's what we're really interested in. And so there was this mad gold rush on that Facebook. Oh, sorry, the other part of that was not only will you put it there, we're going to give you access to all of these notification channels and feed to get distribution for your application. That was the other piece of it. And so you had this mad rush of developers coming in, and you had this huge like social application, social gaming boom. People just grew incredibly virally very fast. But eventually, essentially what happened over time is they kept peeling back that value exchange. They first were like, actually, that those dollars that you're making inside that canvas area, well, we want a percentage of that, right? And so they changed that. And then they figured out their ad systems, and then they started peeling back. They started suppressing access to all of the organic channels that they had. Eventually, they went all the way towards absorbing the highest, use case into their own first-party platform, things like first-party applications, things like events, photos, all those types of things, and basically shut down the platform for dead. And these companies that have basically built on top of this platform, the other thing is, by the time they started closing all those things down, all those competitors that we talked about, they were so far ahead at that point because they had built off the back of all these developers coming, adding use cases, bringing more users onto the platform, like identifying that moat. They were so far ahead, it didn't matter. It didn't matter what the other folks did at that point. And that's what kind of really gives you confidence to start closing down. But there's so many other examples of this, right? If we go through it, right? So
just before you get other examples, just something I'll highlight here. One is the moat they identified in theory was the friend graph, I imagine. Just like once we have all your friends, you're not going to want to go anywhere. I imagine it's also important to note, you may not, this is kind of like a natural thing that would happen if you build the thing and it grows and you're like, oh, maybe we should change strategy. I imagine not everyone even knows this is what will happen and they kind of organically evolve their strategy. Or do you think everyone's just like, this is going to be our plan, step 1, 2, 3, 4?
I think a different version of that question is, I think some people could sit here and interpret this as all these folks are evil, right? And that's not what I'm saying, right? Like that's actually not what I'm saying. I want to be very clear on that, because I think this cycle happens because of competitive and capitalistic like dynamics and pressures. It's the same environment that enables like creating amazing new companies right here in the US. So and there's like two sides of the coin. And so you go through this cycle because it's a competitive environment. You're trying to figure out how to beat competitors. And this is one of the strategies to beat competitors. But at some point, like you just have to continue growing. You have to grow those dollars. Like the market does not reward flat companies. If anybody's noticed, like you have to keep growing. And so they have to keep finding ways to grow as well as prevent their own disruption, right? They can get so big and they can give so much access of distribution to new developers. They don't want to enable their own disruption as well as like they need to keep growing. And so my guess is anybody who is kind of sitting in their shoes, owning their platform is going to follow the exact same playbook and in the exact same reasoning. And, look, sometimes it happens also because it actually is the best thing for the user. Facebook's channels did get super spammy and like all of those things. And that was part of the reason, they play this, but let's be honest, it wasn't the only reason, right? Like a lot of it was for these other reasons. And so I don't think it's evil. It's just, you need to know how to play you just need to know how to play the game. That's competition. That's business. They're playing you, so you need to play them. Like that, like that might be a little sadistic or something, but that is business. That's you're in a game of competition.
Yeah. Essentially the incentives are pointing you in this direction. Capitalism, this is how capitalism works. And so it'll pull everyone in this direction, even if they want to avoid it. Let's do a couple more examples.
Yeah, we'll go through them quick. I think everybody's Google's an interesting one because it played out over a much longer period of time. Facebook happened over the course of about 5-ish years, something like that. Google kind of did it like very slowly over years, but same thing, right? Massive competition against Yahoo. I don't know, AltaVista, Lycos, you name them all, right? That was even before my time, right? They were first to really identify these data moats and incentivizing essentially web developers, content folks to optimize, for their search algorithms. It create this great distribution mechanism. Everybody's kind of building content and everything, for them. But over time, slowly but surely, right, they did two things. One is more and more that real estate became ads that they were monetizing. So they're suppressing organic distribution in order to push people towards the ads, as well as absorbing a bunch of the highest value first party use cases, things like travel, as an example, or even like restaurant search and like all those types of things, the Yelp, former Yelp CEO and founder, has been out there saying a lot of things about these practices. So same exact cycle. Mobile went through the exact same cycle, right? iOS created a new distribution mechanism. They were in massive competition. They had a ton of competition among different phones when they first started on. They found the defensibility was more about the apps. They got in all the developers, created the app store, like all of these types of things. But over time, we've seen more and more restrictions there on that front. And then most recently, right, like we've seen this happen in smaller places too. LinkedIn, as an example, first went through this wave with company pages, right? They were like, companies, come on, promote your company page, bring in more users, like all that type of stuff. And then get all these followers. And then, of course, you get almost no distribution now through your company page because they're pushing you towards ads. And then they recently just did this with personal profiles too, which is they really boosted distribution for individuals to create content for that platform. They then introduced the thought leader ad format, a way to monetize those individual posts. And now you've seen them really pull back on that organic distribution. So this happens in big forms, and it happens even in smaller use cases as well. But once again, the steps of the cycle are exactly the same. And the key part about this too is the broad trend is that the cycles seem to be getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. So you actually have a smaller amount of time to play the game.
Okay, and the big aha here is, yes, this will end maybe not great for you, but there's this magical period when they're open to customers and users where you can grow like crazy because they want everyone to come and they give you a distribution. And what you're saying essentially is ChatGPT, potentially some other platform maybe, is about to enter this mode.
Yeah. Well, let me first, before we get to ChatGPT, I think the natural reaction when you first realize this is screw them. I'm not playing that game. Right? Like that's what I feel like most people like how they react, right? Because the unfortunate truth is that a lot of companies don't predict that last stage and end up in a really hard position, right? So many companies got completely killed during the crash of the Facebook social platform. Apple's 30% tax basically destroyed a bunch of types of applications and business models because it just wasn't like margin effective. Like so many companies built on SEO loops, right, that are in serious trouble right now if that's their only channel. So all of these things, right? And so I think the natural reaction is, like why would I play this game if I'm a startup or a company? And you can even see this with like ChatGPT as an example, right? They just launched these like deep research connectors. One of them was my former company, HubSpot. And, if you sat inside HubSpot and you were just thinking in isolation, you would be like, well, why would I want to make all of my data accessible through ChatGPT and have like all of the usage you start to accrue there, right? Like, it doesn't really make sense in isolation, but we don't operate in isolation. Once again, we operate in a competitive environment. And what's going to happen is that if you don't do it, your competitors are going to certainly go to the new platform and your customer expectations change and you have to rise to those customers' expectations. Like they're going to start expecting you to be in these new experiences and all these things. And so it ends up being a prisoner's dilemma, right? Which is like there is no opting out of the game. You have to play the game. And so it's better to be early than to be super late to this game, especially if you are a startup, right? That's kind of like the key. That's kind of like the key opportunity. And so we'll talk a little bit more about how to play the game more, but it's better to be early as well as then the key. The harder part about it is anticipating that last stage of the cycle and figuring out how to sequence away from something before that last cycle comes. So I think that's the key part. But let me pause there and then I'll talk a little bit about ChatGPT and some of my reasoning behind that.
Cool. So what you're saying is not only is there going to be this big opportunity to grow, if you don't take advantage of it, somebody in your space will. So It's not only there's an opportunity, but this is something you need to do because you might miss the boat. And I think about companies like Zynga that grew on Facebook and then became massive companies. And, if they didn't do that, they would have missed the boat. Someone else would have eaten that lunch. I don't know. I'm thinking about the technology Bros podcast on Twitter right now, TBPN, where they basically figured out on Twitter you can create this like live stream and you see it all day in your Twitter feed, just like, hey, they're broadcasting, and it's a really cool distribution channel. So I think there's like a big call to arms here almost of just the opportunities emerging, and you basically need to pay attention. You can't opt out.
That's right.
Awesome. Okay,
exactly.
let's chat. Yeah, so let's talk ChatGPT.
So look, like let's go through this cycle. Right now we're in that competitive environment. Like we said, like all those players we talked about, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, all these folks, they are battling it out, right? And we've seen this with the talent wars, especially over the past month or so, and so there's no clear winner yet, but there's consensus around the category. The second thing is then, okay, what's the moat? Has the moat been identified, and who seems to have identified it the first or is furthest along? I think there's, my hypothesis, and I think there's a lot more consensus around this now than there might have even been 3 months ago, is that the moat is really about context and memory. These models, by themselves, if you compare them side by side, they kind of generate the same results. And so the actual difference maker is which one has more of your context and because it's the context plus the model that produces the best output. And then that kind of starts to accrue to this loop around memory. The more you use it, the more it's able to store memory around you, which kind of feeds more personalized context, which produces better outputs, right? It ends up being another one of those flywheels, another one of those loops. And so if you look at who's farthest on this, it definitely is ChatGPT, right? Like they were kind of the first ones to memory. They've been investing a lot in these different types of data connectors, essentially context connectors, gathering all of this context. And so you can really start to see it in the usage. But the second thing is in one of the pushbacks I've gotten on my prediction has been, well, what about like Google and Gemini? Like they have so much distribution through Chrome and like all of this other stuff, right? But it was Didi Das, who's a VC at Menlo Ventures, actually published some good data on retention of all of these different ones. And I think the second reason I predict ChatGPT is like, if you look at history, once again, it was never the person who had the biggest distribution at the moment of time. It was the one that had the best retention and engagement. Google had the best retention and engagement over the others. Facebook was smaller, but had way better retention and engagement over the others, right? So on and so forth. And so the data that Didi published clearly showed that both the retention curves, which I know you and I have both written about at exhaustion, level off at significant portions higher than all the other platforms, as well as those retention curves have been shifting up dramatically over time. You can start to see the effects of memory. And they have the very elusive smile curve, right? The ones that you just like. And the only other times I've seen, all of those dynamics very few times in my career. And they tend to be the folks like Slack and like all of the big winners. It's just like so elusive.
And the smile curve, just so people don't know what that is, essentially retention goes up over time. It goes down a little bit, and then you come back to it and you use it more.
Yeah, that's right. And that's usually the result of some type of network effect or something else, and it's a early indicator that these folks that platform is on a trajectory to hit escape velocity. The third piece is that, and they haven't really hidden these, but there's all sorts of signals that they're about to launch a third-party platform. They've been hiring for a bunch of roles. I've seen multiple postings on like product manager, engineering roles, all that kind of stuff for quote unquote agent platform. And all those pieces. And so it feels pretty inevitable that one of these players will need to launch a third-party platform in order to, serve all the possible use cases on these tools. There's going to be some value exchange, which is like, hey, for your agent to be effective, you probably need access to context and memory and distribution, right? So there'll be some value exchange. So integrate to us and we'll give you those 3 things, right? Which is going to drive more users and more usage, and we're going to go through the steps of the cycle. And you can already see this, right? Like, they're starting to form preferred partnerships, right, with some of the bigger players, which paves the way for smaller third-party players. It kind of lends credibility to the platform. It's like, well, if HubSpot and XYZ are doing it, then I should probably do it too. It's like that type of mentality. But that's why I think out of all of these platforms, ChatGPT has the best shot right now. And then a bunch of folks are always like, well, what about Claude? I really like Claude. I use Claude. Well, the problem with that is like, I think ChatGPT at this point has like at least a 10x difference on MAU. So if you're a developer, right, and you're comparing those two platforms, and you're looking at it and you're like, well, ChatGPT has 10x the number of users and better retention and engagement. It's like, what's the logical choice of which one you're going to prioritize your scarce resources on, right? And so those are just some of the reasons that my prediction is on ChatGPT. And in the blog post that I wrote about this, I actually then played my own devil's advocate and said, okay, here are some reasons why it might not be ChatGPT, but I think we're in that part of the cycle. That's my prediction. I might be wrong on the prediction to ChatGPT, but I really think I feel very confident we're going to see this cycle play out again.
2 follow-up questions here. One is, what would be the backup if it's not ChatGPT? It sounds like it might be Gemini, Google.
My hypothesis of who is best positioned but is not executing on it right now would actually be Apple, because through the devices, they basically can see everything. So they have the ultimate view into your context, right? They're sitting at that level. But I don't know what they're doing. Like from an execution standpoint, maybe they're gonna surprise us with something crazy magical. But we haven't seen any external signals around this. So that's probably just based on what real estate and where people live in the stack would own. And then I think right behind that, I would probably put Google, because of owning the context of things like email and the distribution points of search and Chrome and Android and those types of pieces. But and a lot of people point to them, but my experience with all of their products is like going back to the retention engagement thing is that if we could take a look inside their metrics, I think what we would see is a bunch of flyby users in their mouths. Like they're kind of sprinkling the Gemini bucket everywhere. And I've like literally clicked on it accidentally multiple times. And so my guess is a huge portion of their mouths is exactly that, of like what's happening right now. And so, look, they just they just acquired a very talented team from Windsurf.
Just the team,
yeah,
part of the team.
Yeah, we'll see. And things are changing dramatically, on a week to week basis. So we'll see if they're able to press those advantages in a very clear way. But I think the window is very small for them if ChatGPT plays their cards right, because they clearly have the escape velocity right now. And if they just keep pressing that advantage in the right way, I think it's going to be very hard for Google to counter in the amount of time that's left.
On the Claude piece, I'll just throw this nugget out. I had Mike Krieger on the podcast, head of product CPO at Anthropic, and asked him just, you're losing to ChatGPT. How do you approach the future of Claude? And he very specifically said, yes, they've caught lightning in a bottle. This is just going to win based on what I've seen at Instagram. And so we are specifically focusing on what is Anthropic and Claude incredibly good at, which is developer tools, coding, backend stuff. So they're actually leaning more and more into that. And if you've seen their revenue recently, they're making, I don't know, like approaching 10 billion a year, some crazy amount of money. So they're actually doing super well, just in a different use case.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned this, because this brings up something that we skipped, which is there are smaller platforms that have existed and will also emerge in this environment as well. And that's kind of like what you're alluding to, is this tends to happen is like things end up, growing into more niches. Like even if you look at social, right? Like LinkedIn emerged as a subset of the social world, but but even on these smaller platforms, these new distribution channels, they go through the same cycle. I'll give something, really a very opposite example of the ones that I gave. Like, look at the platform Udemy, right? They are a platform for course creators, right? I don't know if most people know this, but when they started, their rev share to creators was something like 80% to creators. They started very high, and that brought on all the course creators, got their whole marketplace going, like so on and so forth. I believe it was about a year ago they announced that they're essentially pushing that rev share down to something like somewhere between 15 and 20%. They're somewhere at like 25 and 30%, right? So another example, right, of like they close down organic distribution in order to monetize, like all that kind of stuff. And the same thing will happen in this AI world. I believe, Cursor, it's very clear like Cursor's on the path to also probably create some type of agent platform, right, for developers. So that'll be like a smaller ecosystem to play in for some products. There's all sorts of, it feels like everybody has the same strategy at this point, is everybody wants to launch an agent platform. I imagine some of these other horizontal productivity tools will do the same thing, maybe like a Notion or an Airtable or like a Monday.com or something like that. So there will be smaller platforms that will emerge, and they will follow the exact same cycle that I'm also discussing. But yeah, in terms of like the biggest kind of consumer one, that's where I think ChatGPT has probably the most escape velocity, and others will focus on different areas. And just to be clear, I love Claude. I actually use both Claude and ChatGPT all for different things. I have lots of love to go around for all these tools. My prediction has no bearing on which product I like the most right now.
I also love Claude. So I think the key point here you're making is that there's almost a number of distribution channels emerging. Many of them will be niche. So I think of LinkedIn. If I want to, like, LinkedIn for me is a very targeted audience for folks that listen to this podcast. So
yeah,
even though it's not, I don't know, Google or Facebook or whatever, it's still incredibly valuable for the specific thing that I do.
For sure.
So I think this is even more interesting, that there's going to be a number of distribution channels that emerge out of this whole AI wave. The other thing I'll note real quick, you mentioned this idea of everyone's building agents. I just had Brett Taylor on the podcast who's building Sierra. And he made me realize why everyone's building agents partly. One is because the outcome-based pricing that you can charge with agents is incredible, because one, you can actually attribute their impact on your business's ROI. You can actually see this is saving an agent $15 because it solved the case. And it's attributable and it's autonomous. It's just doing it on its own. So with that, you can charge per outcome. You can say, we'll charge you $1 every time it solves an issue. So the monetization opportunity is huge. The margins go up like crazy.
Can I just ask a question about that? Do you think that has longevity? In the sense that that makes sense in the current environment that we're sitting in right now, because people are kind of comparing these outcomes relative to what it costs them today with pure humans. But once again, competition comes in at some point. And so that feels like that creates a pretty ripe opportunity to, undercut and come into, and then you have like all like the disruption theory kind of playing out as well. And so it obviously depends on like the infrastructure costs and compute costs to run these things. But I just wonder how much of that is temporary versus something that'll be long term.
So you're saying that dollar will come down to like 50 cents, 25 cents, or are you saying someone's going to come with a whole new business model and disrupt that whole approach?
More the first. Yeah, like it's just competition erodes that away, essentially.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. So margins will be higher for a while and then they'll come down.
Unless there's something else that creates like durable pricing power, right?
I wonder if that. Yeah, so I wonder if what
so that's
that
probably the
is
second piece of this. Yeah, that's probably the second piece of that hypothesis. I feel like,
yeah. I guess the opportunity there, the moat would be the data, like similar to how Cursor is collecting more feedback on what is people want in their code suggestions. Maybe in theory, Sierra has more and more data over time, and there's kind of this network effect.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so let me revise that. Yeah, it's like I believe in that as long as it's paired with
some moat.
The second piece. Otherwise, it gets competed away. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Good tangent. Okay, one more question. What is your prediction on timeline for when the opportunity appears, and what do you predict as of the day we're recording? What do you predict will be the next couple things that ChatGPT, and let's just focus on that, releases to start to open up this platform to get everyone in there?
Yeah, well, look, I'll first give the disclaimer that I feel like Any thoughts on timing in the AI market have been very hard to predict. It's always shorter. That's where we should bias. It's always shorter than you think of like when something's going to happen. But that's what it's felt like from the seat that I've been sitting in. But my guess is this: we're going to see the next major steps of this play out over the next 6 months. And so I think we just saw one of the pieces drop around this, which was ChatGPT's recently launched agent mode. And so it's kind of a general purpose agent, and I think that starts to introduce all of the users to using agents, and they're kind of figuring out and placing it in the different tiers and business models, all of those pieces. But it's likely that no general purpose agent is going to fulfill all of the infinite use cases successfully. And there's 2 reasons for this, right? Users struggle with horizontal tools. They can do everything, and that's exactly why they struggle to adopt. And so they typically need more specific entry points. But also, the more specific use case you get, sometimes you need specific UI, specific data, like other specific ingredients, to properly fulfill that use case for a given audience. And so I think their agent mode was a step in this direction. What I would expect to see play out next is that they will either announce the platform, or what they're going to announce with preferred partners, or what they're going to announce first is basically a set of preferred partners, the guinea pigs, an initial 10 to 20 folks that are like bringing agents to their platform. And what that does is it essentially, once again, it's a credibility card, right? You do special deals with some like right brand names to give the platform credibility, and it kind of creates this desire from everybody else to come on, to the platform. And then the step after that is starting to open up the platform, and this is where the real, where we'll really start to figure out what this game is going to look like, because they basically have to define what the value exchange is. What are they giving you access to, right? And like, what are they incentivizing you with to come onto the platform? So that's one version of it. The other version of it is just like the replacement to search. There will probably be, you can also see them starting to make more moves here, which is like deeper attribution in some of the results, like those types of pieces. They're bringing in shopping, right? Like that's one of their recent announcements as well, kind of native into the UI. Essentially, they will form new monetization mechanisms around that stuff as well. And that's actually going to be very important, because for them to, going back to the moat around memory and context, is that they will want to incentivize as many people to their free tier as possible. But given the costs of AI, they have to cover it somehow. So they're going to need some monetization mechanisms. So the more that they can cover that free usage with things that aren't subscriptions, I think that probably also kind of feeds them out. So I think those are some of the next steps on 2 different vectors, more of like a third-party developer platform, and more of the, kind of content, whatever you want to call it, AEO, GEO. I don't know what acronym is we've all decided on yet. Let me know if we have. And I think those will be the next steps that we'll see. Now, that's what I think for ChatGPT. I think the thing that we should talk about is like, essentially what I would advise folks, especially startups, is you're placing bets. At this part of the cycle, you're placing bets. The winner is 100% guaranteed, as I mentioned. And so you essentially at some point will need to make some decisions about, where to place your bets. In the Facebook days, all those other social networks, they also came out, with their own platforms, right? And iOS had Android and some failed initiatives from Windows. I don't even remember what that platform was called, right? And you can look back, and whoever placed their, the iPhone was actually and iOS is a good one, which is if you had only aligned your bets to Android, you probably lost. If you somehow found a way to play on both ecosystems, you could be a winner. But if you only aligned to iOS, you could also be a winner, right? So like that's just right. Like you had to have iOS as part of your betting strategy in order to win. So everybody right now, like you're probably at the cycle and trying to figure out, well, everybody will need to figure out where are they going to place their chips? How are they going to bet? And depending on how you bet really depends on what your current position is in the marketplace. If you're a late stage startup, let's start with that, or like a late stage company, you can afford the luxury to place multiple bets and kind of spread your chips and kind of wait it out a little bit to see who the winner is, and then really throw your muscle, behind that winner. You have that luxury a little bit, and of course, but the risk of that, the risk of that is that sometimes the incumbents wait too long to make that decision, and that's like kind of the key question they will need to answer. The key question for startups is totally different. You don't have the luxury to spread your chips. Like, you have to go all in. You have to choose one and go all in. You have scarce resources, scarce attention from the market. And so it's a totally different ballgame. Higher risk, higher reward, for sure. And that's part of the betting strategy for startups. And so that's kind of what you have to do, is you kind of have to figure out your betting strategy, and then we can talk a little bit about how you might evaluate and pick the right horse for you. But that's where we're all at right now, is where we just entered the casino. We just put some cash in for some chips, and now we've got to figure out what tables and where to place those chips.
I love this analogy. Okay, so just to be crystal clear about what listeners should do, what founders should do, what product teams should do, the advice here essentially is integrate with, and ChatGPT, maybe Gemini, maybe if Apple has something, like actually integrate with what they launch. So it could be a login thing, could be a search thing, could be a connect and suck up your memory and context. The advice here is you need to do this, because this is potentially the way that most companies will start to grow, and your competitors may overtake you.
Yeah. If we had to like really simplify it, it's essentially play the game. Don't opt out of the game. Don't trick yourself into thinking that you can't play the game. That's number one. And then number two, no matter who you bet on, just make it a focused bet. Because if you look back, all the failures are the ones that tried to, play multiple games at once with scarce resources, and that just tends to never work if you're an early stage startup. So those two things: play the game, put a focused bet.
This episode is brought to you by Miro. Every day, new headlines are scaring us about all the ways that AI is coming for our jobs, creating a lot of anxiety and fear. But a recent survey from Miro tells a different story. 76% of people believe that AI can benefit their role, but over 50% of people struggle to know when to use it. Enter Miro's Innovation Workspace, an intelligent platform that brings people and AI together in a shared space to get great work done. Miro has been empowering teams to transform bold ideas into the next big thing for over a decade. Today, they're at the forefront of bringing products to market even faster by unleashing the combined power of AI and human potential. Guests of this podcast often share Miro templates. I use it all the time to brainstorm ideas with my team. Teams especially can work with Miro AI to turn unstructured data like sticky notes or screenshots into usable diagrams, product briefs, data tables, and prototypes in minutes. You don't have to be an AI master or to toggle yet another tool. The work you're already doing in Miro's canvas is the prompt. Help your teams get great work done with Miro. Check it out at miro.com/Lenny. That's miro.com/Lenny. So you were head of growth at HubSpot for a long time. And you gave that as an example, HubSpot. Why would they integrate? Why would they give away all their data so that ChatGPT can suck it up and you never have to go to HubSpot? You're just working through their agent. Would you at HubSpot be like, yes, we got to do this. This is the game we got to play?
Yeah, 100%. And that's exactly what I think you see them doing. And look, to be very clear, I have not talked to anybody at HubSpot about this. I have not talked to Dharmesh about this. But Dharmesh, I think, has also publicly published about this. But that the right thing to do is essentially, even though you understand how the cycle plays out, and you don't necessarily understand what your exit strategy is once you get out, it's better to be early, know that you need to figure out an exit strategy and figure out that exit strategy along the way, versus waiting and then being super late and then know what the exit strategy is. And I think that's essentially That's exactly what you see them doing. They're trying to be as early to this stuff as possible, and I think it's a pretty smart play, even though we might not necessarily see like what the exit strategy is out of this cycle for them.
So going back to that amazing quote that you shared at the beginning of the conversation by, I think it was Alex Rampal, of that startups win by finding a distribution channel before the incumbent copies them. And what you're saying here is this is the opportunity for startups to disrupt an incumbent. This is the opportunity for someone to disrupt Salesforce, I don't know, ServiceNow, all these guys that have been around for a long time.
Yeah, it's going to be one of the major ones. Now, look, you've already seen players that have been able to hit this escape velocity, the cursors and stuff of the world. So there's multiple ways to hit that escape velocity, but this is going to be one of the major ways to do it, is to basically hitch yourself to a new platform. Look, you did it yourself. Actually, you hitched yourself to Substack super early. You took a focused bet. I was like, I don't know why that just hit me, but you took a focused bet, and you've benefited from it in a disproportional way than those that kind of came later. And I think that's actually a great meta example here as I sit here and think about this.
Yeah, that's actually the way I thought about when I was moving to Substack. Just like, I feel like there's this wave rising and I want to ride this wave, even if maybe it's not the best place, or maybe, they take a cut, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But it worked out really well.
That's right.
And
I think it worked out very well.
It worked out really well. And to be honest, it felt like it was too late. When I started
when you
6 years
entered,
ago,
it felt too late?
Yes.
Oh, say more about that.
It always feels too late, I think, to people that join, like Silicon Valley, Mark Andreessen has this famous quote. He's like, I came to Silicon Valley in the 80s. I thought it was over. It was too late. I missed all the opportunities.
That's fair.
So there were just a lot of newsletters. They were doing really well, 1 million subscribers. I'm like, now.
And what do you say to people now who want to join Substack?
Let's learn from this example. A lot of times when people think that it's too late, it's definitely not too late, and it's always only just getting started, especially if you're like on Twitter all day, listening to podcasts like this, where we're surrounded with this bubble of everyone talking about something, when in reality, like 1% of people know anything about what you're hearing about every day.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
Okay, so coming back to the advice, say someone is sitting there and talking to their manager, like, Brian just shared all this mind-blowing advice. So we got to pick our battles. We got to pick our platform. What would your advice be for them to decide where to place their bets?
Yeah. So I think this is a great question, because once again, put my personal prediction aside for a second, and I would encourage everybody to think about it from first principles, from their who their audience is, what their product is, what stage of company they're at, like all those their current strengths and weaknesses. You got to take all this into account. But if I had to boil it down to a few criteria, the main things I would think about is when you're looking at new distribution channels and new platforms to choose on, one, kind of going back to what we said before, is the better signal is retention and depth of engagement of the users on this platform than it is like pure kind of user level, like MAU or some other like number of signups, one of those vanity metrics. So look at that, number one. Number two is there's some element of like user quality and an ability to monetize the users on this platform. I think the starkest example here would be, iOS and Android. It's like, even today, it's something like Android has 70 some percent of devices, but only 30% of the market share by dollars. And it's the exact flip for iOS. So it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which was if you bet on Android only, you probably lost. But if you bet on iOS only, even though smaller user base, you were still able to parlay that into a win later. The third thing to look at is, as these platforms emerge, just analyze what the value exchange is, right? So what are they giving you to incentivize you to develop on their platform? And like all these platforms are a bit of a game of whoever understands the rules and how to arbitrage the rules the best, right? Tend to be the ones with the edge and figure that out. And then finally, fourth on my criteria would be pure scale, right? Obviously, even if you have those other three, but there's, 200x difference in scale and momentum, then like obviously you probably have to choose the bigger platform. But last but not least is, as you go through these criteria, these are how you think through entering the game, and once you enter the game, then you immediately need to move to starting to think about how do you exit the game, knowing once again that last step is going to come at some point in the future, that there's going to be some closure for monetization. Then that's where you have to start thinking through your strategy to exit. And that comes down to things like, okay, well, how are you going to own an important part of the user experience or workflow? Or, how are you going to accumulate specialized data in context that the major platforms don't have? Or how do you create, different types of like micro network effects, like all of these types of things. So just once again, though there is the entrance criteria, but once you figure that out and you feel like you're in the game, you immediately need to move towards, okay, what's my exit plan here, knowing this is all coming.
It's interesting that another way to think about this model you've described is building the strategy of building on top of LLMs and becoming a GPT wrapper. Because essentially, this tech allows you to, say, create a cursor that is incredible. And then you could argue, oh, you're just going to be this wrapper, and why would anyone, they're getting all the money here, everyone can copy you. Like, what's your defensibility long term? And the answer is, what is the moat you will build over time sitting on top of this thing that will make you more and more valuable long term and not have to rely on this thing? So it feels like you could use the same framework for building a GPT wrapper business.
Yeah.
To use that euphemism.
Yeah.
So say someone is sitting there today, is there anything they can do to start making a bet? Is it simply creating an MCP that allows LLMs to suck in your data? Is that the one thing you could do today? Is there anything else that's available today to start using these platforms, or is it just a little too early and they haven't released the good stuff yet?
It might be just like a tad too early, like we're like right on that edge. But some of the questions I'm asking myself is, I'm kind of going through all of these players and where our customers and target audience live, and I'm asking myself, the question, okay, if this player launched some type of platform, like how would we evaluate it, so on and so forth. It's hard to, you can also try to cozy up to these folks. I would place a large portion of my net worth right now that if we could sit in the OpenAI offices, like at that front desk, that they are having, meetings with potential preferred developers, like talking about this. We could probably sit there and log it. So I do think some people are going to be in a place to develop preferred relationships and make a note. And if you're in that spot, then you should definitely play that card. A lot of early stage startups won't be in that card place. Other than that, I would say we still need to, like, once they launch these platforms, it's like you can't do much else until you really kind of know what the value exchange is and what they're going to expose for you. But also just be prepared to turn your strategy on a dime and go all in. I think that's probably one of the hardest parts of this, is that these things emerge and you have to capitalize extremely quickly. And a lot of times it's hard for leaders to do that because they don't want to create a feeling of whiplash into the unknown. We've got all these projects in play, like all all the things. So I think that's probably the last part of what we can be doing right now versus just kind of staying on top of everything as it emerges.
As you were talking, this reminded me, I recently noticed that ChatGPT is driving me to my newsletter more traffic than Twitter. And I feel like that recently shifted. I didn't even know this was a thing until I just started looking through my referrals. I'm like, ChatGPT, what the hell is going on there? And I think it's like a different version of what you're talking about, but essentially it's like, in theory, I could block ChatGPT from, I don't know. I don't even know if I can from being
You can in Substack now. Yeah, I just saw that setting in there. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Yeah. But that's a similar kind of decision, is like, is it better for me for it to be recommending my stuff and telling people, hey, go check this thing out? Or is it better to block it off? And I think, per your point, and this is how I felt, like, take it all, just like, it's good. In that it's better that it's like from Lenny's newsletter than something else. So someone else will come in and eat that market share.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, like if you don't do it, somebody else is. And I think that's also kind of what all the major media publishers are really contending with right now.
I guess I need a licensing deal in New York Tech stuff. Anyway, okay, I want to go on a totally different tangent. We weren't planning to talk about this. I know that I said this, we're going to be fully focused on this one topic, but there's something you mentioned to me before we started recording that I think will be really interesting to a lot of people. So you guys at Reforge are now building actual SaaS products that people can buy. It's not just courses. I don't know if people know that, but let's make sure people understand this. There's actually products for product teams. So maybe just explain that briefly. But the thing that I think is really interesting here is you work with a lot of companies now selling them AI tools. And you have noticed a very big difference between the companies that are really good at adopting AI tools and seeing gains from them from those that don't. Talk about just what you see there. And because this is, in theory, going to be really helpful to companies that are struggling with adopting AI tools and seeing gains.
Yeah, just to quickly explain that transition so it makes sense for people, which is, I started Reforge just with the interest that there was all these incredible leaders out there growing, on the front lines of some of the fastest growing companies, and they had all this amazing knowledge, and I wanted to encode it in useful and practical ways for others, right? And that took the form of courses and content and product, all that kind of stuff at the beginning. And along the way, everybody kept asking us to essentially build the tools to implement what we taught. Because, with anything is like, you can learn as much as you want. You can listen to my podcast, your podcast, Lenny, like whatever, as much as you want. But if you don't actually put it into action and implement it, then it's not really going to create value, right? And so people kept asking us to really close that gap. And we said no for the longest time. And then about a couple of years ago, when AI really started to inflect, it really created this moment that, oh, wow, now there's this opportunity not just to encode this knowledge into content, but also into the products, the software, the tools that we use ourselves. And so we started to take a really big bet on that, and started to develop this new platform for AI native product teams. The first product we launched is called Reforge Insights, which acts like your AI product researcher, kind of aggregates all the feedback from all the sources, uses AI to analyze it, helps you explore it, but also will start to identify like what are the gaps, the things that you don't have in your feedback today, and auto-generate the research to go gather all those new insights. So complete the full cycle. We're going to launch 2 other major products as part of this platform before the end of the year, but we'll save that for some future episode. So that's kind of been our journey. And so we've seen inside companies that are going through this transformation from 2 perspectives. One is obviously selling in that tools, but the other perspective is for 10 years, companies have been coming to us to help them drive some sort of transformation with our learning product. Most companies are not coming to us to just like throw a bunch of courses in front of. They're trying to solve some big business problem, some transformation. Now that used to be things like, we've got to figure out this growth thing, right? Or I'm going from sales led to product led, or I'm turning. I have more project managers and I need to transition to product managers, right? Like something like that, or there's some business problem. They're going through some transformation, and they saw us as part of that transformation, and we got to partake in quite a few of those types of transformation. Now, of course, the transformation that everybody's going through is, okay, how do I become more AI native? How do I adopt this stuff? And so we've seen a pretty wide spectrum and from both perspectives of how companies are approaching this. And I'm sure everybody's seen the AI, we've been calling them like the AI manifesto memos from CEOs out there that proclaim we are now AI native, in some grandiose, way, right? But there's behind the scenes, there's actually some incredibly stark differences in the actual teeth of what backs up those memos and backs up those executive decrees that, we should all be, AI. And so just to kind of point out a few of them, which is, one is that I think the most impactful thing that you can do is form really hard constraints. So a lot, there's other parts is like, okay, you want to communicate this, you want to establish an owner of who's going to drive this, you want to build in incentives and rewards, and you see this all playing out in things like building it into your, your career ladders, or some people are starting to introduce this as questions into their performance reviews, like, all those types of pieces. But the thing that is actually moving the needle are the companies that are defining incredibly hard constraints. So one company that we worked with developed this constraint that they benchmarked against other companies of their revenue size and the team sizes for their stages. And they set a benchmark that we will be 1/5. Each of our functions will be 1/5 the size. And what that did is it created a constraint that you couldn't hire above that level. And it forced people to essentially find ways to adopt AI and do things to replace that. So that was one. You've seen these other ones. I can't remember from what company. This might have been Shopify or another, who was like, you are not allowed new headcount until you prove to us that you are not able to accomplish this with AI. That's like another hard constraint. But you also see these other constraints on the smaller level, which is, executives saying, I will not do a product review or review a PRD unless it comes with 3 prototypes, something like that. And so that's the hardest one. Those are the biggest constraints. But I think the biggest change that I'm seeing is, and the things that separates out the top few percent making this change and everybody else is essentially making the hardest decisions. And that hardest decision is going to come down to exiting people. So in every transformation, what we see is essentially 3 groups of folks. You see we call them the catalysts, the people kind of leading the charge, the people who are experimenting, doing this on their own time, like all that kind of stuff. You then have what we call your converts. These are folks that will make the transformation, they will adapt, but they need structure. They need permission. They need a clear outline. They need a clear plan, right? And I don't say this in a negative way. It's just that, that's how some people operate, right? And so that's where things like all the things that we were talking about before, which was like the decree, the permission, the clear budgets, the rewards, like all of those types of things. But then inevitably you have a certain percentage that are anchors, right? And they're dragging their feet. They're kind of silently creating friction in the background, and like all those pieces. And there's a big difference in how I think companies are treating and thinking about their strategy for those folks. One group is kind of like, we're going to work with them very passively. Others have set a hard deadline. They're like, they're going to either make the transformation by X date, or we're going to exit folks. And a lot of people look at this as being really harsh. I think a lot of people would think that, especially individuals. But let me kind of explain it from a more of like a CEO perspective. A lot of these companies are seeing this AI transformation, the ones that are taking it more seriously, as this isn't adopting new tools. This isn't a light change. This is a fundamental culture change of how we operate as a company, right? And you can't have 20, 30%, whatever meaningful number of it is, of your company, trying to operate in a completely different way, in a completely different culture. Cultures thrive on density, right? And that's why there's sometimes the best ones feel like cults, And so as a result, from that perspective, it's like, hey, like for us to be successful, for this to be the best thing for all employees, we all need to be operating around the same cultural principles and stuff. And if that's not you anymore, then we're defining a plan to exit it. But I would say that less than 10% of companies we see are taking this hard stance. But I would say they are probably the ones that are farthest along, getting the most adoption, and are seeing the most results of the ones that are taking those hard stances. So there's a bunch of other stuff I could talk about, but that's kind of the high level of kind of what we've seen across a bunch of different companies.
That is incredibly interesting. I'm glad we went there. I have a newsletter post coming out soon, probably before this episode, that touches on a lot of advice along these lines. I'm excited for you guys to keep seeing these insights into companies and sharing more of this, because this is, I think, what a lot of people are looking for. Just like things aren't quite clicking at our company. We keep hearing everyone is getting so much more productive. All these companies are running more efficiently, and it's not working here. And so I think this is the kind of advice a lot of people are looking for. So thank you for sharing all that. Brian, is there anything else that you wanted to touch on? Anything else you wanted to leave listeners with before we get to our very exciting lightning round?
Well, actually, just a couple more points on this topic.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
we should go. Is like there's probably two more things I would say about this. One is that so if you're a CEO listening to this, I would say that most CEOs or most executives are incredibly disconnected from the actual AI adoption taking place inside their companies. I think a lot of executives who have done these degrees and all that kind of stuff think it's kind of happening naturally. But we talk to both groups. We talk to tons of end users and we talk to tons of executives. The story we hear from the end users, the PMs, the Eng, all that kind of stuff that we talk to kind of using all this stuff, one of the main questions we ask them is, if we're talking to somebody who's picked up a prototyping tool, say, well, how many other people on the product and design team are using this? Almost 90% of the time, it's like me and this one other person, and everybody else hasn't taken it up, right? And so there's a huge disconnect. And we heard one story, and I can't say the name, but it's a company we all know. It's a major tech company, tech forward company. CEO's been out there talking about being AI native. We talked to one of their principal PMs. Person was early to the prototyping tools. This person shared a prototype with the designer, the Eng manager. The designer and Eng manager escalated it to the VPs. It caused this whole conversation. Month later, it was kind of still stalling out. This PM happened to then, attend a happy hour where the CEO was at, and approached the CEO and told the CEO about the experiment that they were running with prototyping and stuff. And the CEO was like, "This is fantastic. Like, why, where is it at right now?" I was like, "Oh, well, XYZ happened." And the CEO had no idea. And then the CEO was like, "Okay, let me take care of it." And then the next day, it happened. So one is that you have to go to the ground floor on this stuff. Some of the best companies like Shopify and others are measuring actual adoption and usage. They've gone to the extreme, kind of on that front to get a bunch of signals in close to the ground. But it's just that it just goes to show that this is, I don't think we want to talk about quote unquote founder mode, but the reality is it's not just about getting into the weeds of your product, but with something this sizable, you got to get into the weeds of the transformation to really understand what's going on and adopt it. So that's point number one. The second point I would say is Fareed we do this podcast called Unsolicited Feedback. Fareed Masavat had this great quote on it. He was like, "Look, your output is constrained by the slowest part of your system," and I thought that stuck in my head because it's absolutely true. And so if you think about AI adoption as a system, there's all parts of the system that could be slowing adoption. It might be that people don't feel permission, or they don't have the budget, or they don't have the knowledge, or all these types of things, right? But in a lot of these cases, it's things like IT, legal, procurement are the slowest part of the friction and are kind of setting the pace of all of this output. And you can also see this in just product teams, which is, there's been all this talk about, product managers are becoming the new bottleneck because engineers are speeding up. Well, that's because people are speeding up one part of the product system and not the other parts, which makes sense. Like, they adopted all of this tooling for engineers because they're the biggest headcount and the most expensive and all that type of stuff. But product is an output of design, PMs, and engineering. The system is there not to produce code, it's to ship product, right? And shipping product is the function of those three things. So if you just accelerate one part of the system, you're just going to move to the bottleneck to another part, and your actual product output, the output of the system, doesn't accelerate either. So I think you really got to people have to really understand those two things. Is what is actually happening on the ground floor, and what is the slowest part? What is the thing that is causing the slowest part of the adoption? Just attack them ruthlessly if you're really serious about making this transition.
What a wild time we're living through.
It is a wild
change.
time.
It's
Yeah.
just we had all these ways that we're also used to. Okay, this is how we do it.
Yeah. It's exciting and exhausting at the same time, man. That's how I think about it.
That's such a simple way of describing the world.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. Brian, is there anything else before we get to a very exciting?
That's it. Let's do lightning round.
Let's do it. Here
Zap,
we
zap,
go.
zap. Yeah,
Ding, ding, ding. All right, Brian, I've got 5 questions for you. Are you ready?
let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. What are 2 or 3 books that you find yourself recommending most to other people?
My God, honest answer is that I have not had time to finish an entire book since I had my second child. So from a complete book standpoint, I have not been able to. Things that I've been, that I actively read on a regular basis, just like other content out there, that I'll throw out there is, Jamin Ball from Altimeter Capital writes this great newsletter called Clouded Judgment, which is kind of a mixture of market thoughts as well as like market stats. That's really useful to help me keep a pulse on the market. I was just reading through some like stuff from NFX that was that's been pretty good lately on all of this. I know James Currier and we lived a lot of the same cycles through social and stuff, so I tend to identify with that. So I don't know. Those are 2 things that that I love reading. And sorry, I'll give one more shout out to a different podcast, which is from 2 guys at Spark Capital, Nabil Hyatt, which I know from my early Boston days, and Fraser. Sorry, I'm blanking on the last name right now. Who was head of product at OpenAI, and they've got a great format where it's just those 2 riffing on some ideas and stuff. And I highly suggest that one. I like that one a lot.
Here's my reading tip that has changed my reading habits. Brian Johnson, the longevity guy, he has this advice for better sleep, which includes before you go to sleep, read for 10 minutes in bed.
It does put you to sleep.
Partly
I don't feel like I retain anything that I read that close to bed, though. Do you feel like you retain it?
I do. I'm reading fiction.
Oh.
Like it's nonfiction. You want to read something calm, not like I'm learning. So I'm reading fiction, and it's really nice. And knowing that this is going to help me sleep better makes me motivated to actually
There's an incentive. There's a reward there.
Reward.
Yeah, they're talking about rewards and creating behavior change. Yeah.
Exactly. And the reason to do it is his whole thing is you want to get to a low resting heart rate, and then helps lower your resting heart rate.
So I've got some other sleep tips on that front if you want to go down that path, but we'll save that maybe.
That'll be for the 3rd podcast. Okay. Next question. Do you have a favorite recent movie or TV show that you really recently enjoyed?
It's not new, but I just rewatched Silicon Valley that I hadn't watched in a number of times. And it's painful because like the first few seasons, I went through almost every one of those moments in my first startup, like hiring the gray-haired CEO, the funding falling through at the last second, like all the crazy stuff. But kind of going back and watching that, there's just some extra nuances and stuff that I feel like they wrote really well that I thought was really good. So I've really been watching that. The other thing is that I've watched is just more of like a just pure entertainment kind of calming thing, kind of turn the brain off is Owen Wilson's new show on Apple TV, Stick, which is about him as a former professional golfer, and all that. I won't ruin the show and stuff, but it's a very nice, calming, little bit fun type of show.
I've been seeing that on my Apple TV. Maybe I should check it out. Good tip. Do you have a favorite product you've recently discovered that you really love? It could be a gadget. It could be a app on your phone. It could be something in your computer. It could be nothing at all.
You can't see it, but I do have, I just changed my whole setup. So now I have a Ultra Gear super wide curved screen with a very nice standing desk from, I believe, it's called Ergonophis.
Nice.
Yes, it's I think it's that Ergonophis, ERGONOFIS, and
Nice.
it's a very nice, sleek standing desk, very stable, very quiet. Very much enjoy.
Excellent tip. And the curved monitor, very cool. Okay, 2 more questions. Do you have a life motto that you often come back to and find useful in work or in life? Something you share with folks, something that you think about when times are hard, or just generally?
Look, it's a little cliche at this point, but I used to, somewhere around here, I used to have the quote printed out about, the man in the arena, right? It's just like, just lots of, especially in times like this where so many things are changing and there's so much competition, but so much opportunity for great. I really both respect and enjoy, the game and spending time with folks that are kind of in the arena, figuring this stuff out, tinkering with things, and just, that's kind of a lot what I keep coming back to, especially, been at Reforge for 10 years. That's a good portion of my life. And we've gone through some great periods and some tough periods. And so I tend to come back to that.
And that's what's always separated Reforge from so much other content and advices. It's people in the arena sharing their wisdom, not just a bunch of influencers. And it's sad that Chamath made that quote so cringy.
I know. That's why. I know. That's why I said it's a little cliche cringe right now.
Screwed it up for everyone.
Yeah.
Final question, Brian. You don't know this, but your parenting advice on Adam Fisherman's podcast really impacted my parenting philosophy. Specifically, this line you had about independence.
Oh,
and
yes.
I'd love for you to just share that insight about how you think about raising kids.
Yeah, and I wish I could remember where I grabbed this from so I could attribute it properly. But basically, the philosophy is like your job if you think about going from when they're born until they're essentially 18 and, leave the home, your job as a parent is to essentially make them more and more independent. And so what that involves is continuously looking for opportunities for them to make even bigger and riskier decisions for themselves as they grow up. And you're there as support to those decisions, but letting them make those decisions on their own so that by the time they're 18, they are a fully independent person able to think through those decisions themselves. Now, look, like my sons are young, right? They're 5 and 3. So it's not like I'm having them make, life and death decisions or where we might buy our next house or stuff like that. But it's even small things at this age of, my oldest, like 5.5, is really starting to learn and get curious about like money and how you spend money and where new things come from and how you earn money. And so rather than just like buying things for him, he's got like money from his grandparents and stuff saved up, and we can be like, okay, like you can buy that thing, but you're going to spend this, and try to like teach him the consequences and like all that kind of stuff. And then when he breaks something, right? Like, so it's just small things like that. But thinking about the time from 0 to 18 as this spectrum of independence and being a supporting role, and what you're essentially doing is you're trying to move as many decisions, the percentage of decisions you make for them down to 0 by the time that they're 18. Like, and that's kind of something that I've kept in the back of my head since really seeing that.
Thank you for sharing that. I know I didn't tell you that I was going to ask you about this, so that was a beautiful way
I'm
of
glad
summarizing it.
Yeah, I didn't know where I couldn't remember that whole podcast, so I had no idea what I said. But you could.
That was it.
But that's
Nailed
a good
it.
one. Yeah.
Brian, 2 final questions. Where can folks find you if they want to reach out? Where can they find the products you guys offer? Whatever you want to plug, and also how can listeners be useful to you?
Check out reforge.com. Check out our new products like Reforge Insights. They're on the website. You can find me personally, my writing, including a bunch of the stuff that we talked about today, now on Substack. So just recently moved. So you can either go to my website, brianbalfour.com, where I have some info, or just blog.brianbalfour.com, where all of my new writing is taking place. But those are the 2 major pieces. Last but not least is that, as I mentioned, Fareed Masavat, who I used to work with, he used to Slack. We have this fun podcast. The 2 of us get on there and riff like we were having dinner every couple weeks about different like product and strategy types of things. And so it's a fun format for us. So if that's something you enjoy, it's called Unsolicited Feedback, where we give feedback and advice to nobody that ever asked for it. So it's like,
Amazing.
Yeah.
Perfect title. Brian, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me again. This is great.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the podcast. You can find all past episodes or learn more about the show at lennyspodcast.com. See you in the next episode.